Hey everyone!
Hey!
Happy Valentine's Day!
Happy Valentine's Day!
Day of love. Day of making people feel bad for being single.
Yes.
So, we thought it would be very appropriate to do our first sex stream on Valentine's Day to start shifting the conversation about sex on the left to the left. So before we get into anything today, you can see my esteemed guests are here with me. We have Mexi from the Vegan Vanguard, as well as the Mexi YouTube channel, and Catherine from the Catherine YouTube channel, both dear friends of mine. And some of what we're going to talk about today are things that the three of us plus Maureen have been talking about for a while now. This also is an extension of the video that Mexi did recently about, sex liberation and sex work and the way that we talk about these things on the left. So if you haven't seen that video, somehow it's excellent. I recommend you check it out after the stream. And links to both of their channels are already in the description if you need them there. So before we get into all of the fun that we're going to have today, all of the stuff we want to talk about today, we of course want to have some content warnings for everyone. So we're going to be discussing a lot of themes around sex, obviously, which are going to include consent, a violation of consent, sexual assault and trauma. We're going to be analyzing our socialization around sex in this like patriarchal, misogynist world that we live in. So everything that's going to be connected to that. We're going to talk about how we're socialized through the public space, film, TV, media, education, and porn. Starting off by, let me start off by saying that we support sex workers. We think sex work is real work, and any critiques we have today about the male gaze through porn, we're really critiquing society at large, and we are not critiquing or blaming sex workers themselves. So we just want to make that very clear out of the gate that we are very pro-sex worker. Did you two have anything you want to add in before we move on?
I guess that's basically it. I just know that it's kind of sensitive sometimes for people who are not sex workers to be talking about, how porn influences people and things like that, because it can be read as like, oh, you just want to shut everything down, or you want to attack people's livelihoods. And that's not at all the case. For me, this is more about like, I want to analyze, socialization, and I want to analyze the themes that we are presented, the kinds of images that we are presented, and the way that they are fed to us and how they are shaped by both patriarchy and capitalism, because also capitalism and like all the algorithms and things like that are really determining, like what kind of content we're seeing, and then like how that's impacting like our cultural state. But it's also like our culture is the thing that's really driving all of this. So I just thought it'd be good to talk about that off the bat, because I think that sometimes like women can be really like pit against each other in this really weird way when talking about these things. And I think that really like that division really only serves the patriarchy and capitalism. So, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's everything. I think, you covered it all.
And then we just wanted to say, we're trying this out. We're starting this stream, and it may become its own thing if it gets enough traction. And the reason for us starting this is that we just see that there is some issues with discourse around sex on the left, and we want to do our part to sort of address that and bring in our own viewpoints. A lot of what we're going to talk about today is just from our own experiences. We're not necessarily trying to speak for anyone else. We're just trying to, again, open up a dialogue around this. If this series continues, we may bring in other people who have different experiences and identities than we do. But, in general, obviously, this isn't just a leftist problem. How we talk about sex, period, is really not done well, right? Like, we are usually not talking about sex, and what has happened on the left, is there's a lot of discourse around you can't have a critical lens to a lot of things that are still really big problems without doing harm to other people. And so we just want to come in and try to have very nuanced discussion, right? We love nuance here, about all this stuff. And we're hoping to do it from, a humorous and personal angle, but also with a bit of education, so that as we're going along talking about this stuff, we're also talking about the ways that we can do better, both in the ways that we can talk to each other better, but also how we can actually be having better sex and conversations about sex. So I, for one, am very excited about this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stoked as well.
Yeah. So with that said, Maxie, do you want to kick us off talking about the anatomy of the vagine?
Absolutely. Although I wanted to maybe just start off with like more of like kind of the issues I had with sex, but we can start with anatomy if you want.
Whichever you want to do. I'm down.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I just wanted to say that, like, part of like the issues that I see around like the way that we talk about sex, especially, I'm not especially on the left, like just in general, but I feel like, the patriarchy is often not talked about to any great extent. Like we don't talk a lot about how we have been socialized to view women as sexual objects, and then as women, how we have been socialized to view ourselves and to make ourselves into the sexual objects, because we think we need to, either to deserve love or like keep a man or whatever, or to fulfill our roles as women. But also there's, you know, societal gain that you can get, right, if you more better kind of approximate this vision of the male gaze. But I just wanted to start by saying that like this issue of objectification, like I think that personally I find it to be incredibly violent, and I think that like the male gaze and the objectification of women and turning women into these sexual objects is actually a huge part of upholding patriarchy. Because if you think about it, like it's collectively othering like you know, marginalized people basically, right? And when you other somebody, basically the point of othering is that you other somebody so that you define yourself, like othering defines the self. And so like if men are able to collectively other women and other marginalized genders as being, you know, sexual objects that are to be used for sexual gratification, then they are similarly upholding themselves as the ones who are like humanized and the ones who have agency. And so I think this is actually like a huge pillar of upholding patriarchy. And I think that a lot of times people think that like, oh, objectification of women, this is just kind of trivial. Like there's so many more, you know, there's so many worse problems like sexual assault and rape and whatever. But to me, I see it as all part of the same system of violence. And I view objectification as an incredibly violent act. Like I told you guys when I was writing notes for this thing, like I actually wrote down like the audacity of somebody objectifying somebody else. Like, who the fuck do you think you are? You know, like who do you think you are to objectify somebody else? But it's so normalized for men to objectify women, and it's so normalized for women to not only accept that, but to like, you know, become active participants in our own objectification. And I just want to point out right off the bat, like how deeply that is part of a broader system of violence that is not disconnected from rape culture and like the whole rest of it. Like it's not this frivolous thing that just happens on the side. It's definitely part of this whole system of violence that upholds patriarchy. And I just don't hear much talk about this stuff on the left. I don't hear much talk about the male gaze on the left. And I hear a lot of talk about like sex positivity, but like none of this critical stuff and like all of the work we would need to do to actually arrive at like more of a sex positive place. And a lot of like the education that like we would all need to get there, you know, especially men, no offense, but offense.
Yeah, that was all really well said. And I think also Sylvia Federici talks about this in the book Caliban and the Witch, which I would highly recommend everyone to read. But in the transition from feudalism to capitalism, a really fundamental part of that was the denigration of women as less than, and the denigration of the body as sacred, and as everyone having, as the body is like this magical site, this like spirit, us as spiritual beings. And so it's so fundamental how we treat each other, how we treat each other's bodies, and the denigration of sex and the objectification of women in general is such a fundamental pillar of capitalism existing today. So if we want to dismantle capitalism, we need to be looking at all of these things. And then I also feel like so much, we have so much sexual trauma in general from the kind of interactions that we have during sex, and that then leads to us replicating those kind of unhealthy dynamics later in life. It can lead us to I don't know, be narcissistic, or that trauma can feed into us needing to have more control later in life. And all of these things then end up replicating these same power dynamics throughout our whole entire lives. And then, I mean, Gabor Mate talks about this, how the people in power are extremely traumatized. He talked about Trump and Obama and how they're acting out of trauma. And I think we need to be looking at the ways in which we are all engaging in practices that are traumatizing to us. And I think part of that is the type of sex we have. Like when in our most vulnerable moments, we're often not feeling completely seen or heard and okay within ourselves and in our relationships to the people we trust most, then how are we going to create a society based on love and connection and trust and great connections with other people? So yeah, I just think all of this is so fundamental. So
Yeah.
Beautifully said, both of you. So speaking of connection,
anatomy.
Should we talk about the clit?
Great, yeah, I'm so excited. Yeah. See, this is a fun way to start. So so I want to talk about the clit. I want to give an anatomy lesson of the vagina so that we can all know what's going on down there, because nobody talks about it. You never learn about it anywhere. But okay, let's start with the clit. First of all, the clit is beautiful. It is just absolutely a beautiful, beautiful organ. Chef's kiss. And, only obviously just a very small part of that actually protrudes externally, but it actually still travels up, like even into your thighs, like, it like spreads out into your body, and it connects directly to your G-spot. And even I think up into the nipples, right? Like there's different erogenous zones, but specifically into the G spot. And it is incredibly, incredibly sensitive. Like it can have so much feeling. And that's because there's so many nerve endings concentrated into this very, very small little kind of nubbin. So there's 8,000 nerve endings, at least, in this very small clitoris. And for comparison, that is at least twice the amount of nerve endings that are spread out all across the head of a penis. And if that penis is circumcised, there's less nerve endings there. So it could be like even more, like up to 3 or 4 times the amount of nerve endings. So if you think about like the nerve endings spread out across that space on the head of the penis, they're more spread out, like that's less concentration, but like we have at least 2 times, but possibly more than that, nerve endings concentrated in its small little tiny place. So the clit can be such an amazing place, to start for a lot of women who struggle to have G-spot orgasms, which is, we can get into that later. Like it's definitely, if you think that's like out of the realm of possibility for you, it's definitely within the realm of possibility, but it might take some like finagling depending on, the shape of your partner's penis and like whatever. But anyway, it's definitely possible. But a lot of women, orgasm clitorally. So it's a great place to start. I want to recommend Connor and Brittany have a really great, well, they have several great videos, but they have one called something about the clit, like, are you under or over? And that talks about how, like, because there's so many nerve endings there, what happens often is that like either men will not pay attention to the clit at all, or they'll just go right there and it'll be like a hard finger or like a hard tongue, like right on the clit. And that is so overwhelming and desensitizing. That and once you're desensitized, like that you're not going to be able to come that way. It's too much feeling. So they have a lot of tips about, like just like kind of like brushing over like the outside, or like doing like it lightly so that like, you're brushing over it, but you don't have like a hard finger going on. You don't have a hard tongue. I can't tell you how many times. Well, I mean, not that many times, but like still enough times that it's been like it has bothered me, where like men will just think like, first of all, like they haven't like warmed up the area at all. Like I'm not even really that horny. They're just like going right for it. And they'll just like go right there and just like put a finger on it and just like rub really hard, or just whatever, and think that like if they just do it hard enough and fast enough, then like you're just going to get really turned on. And it's just like, whoa, like that is so overwhelming. I'm now desensitized, like, this is no good. Or they'll go down there with their tongue. And like, I think, again, a lot of people learn this from porn, that they'll like put a hard tongue right on it. They'll like lick around really fast, just like really hard, And it's just like, what are you doing? Like, what do you think I'm feeling right now? Like, so anyway, I really love Connor and Brittany. They also have a video called, I love these comments. But yeah, they have a video called How to Eat Pussy Like a Champ. They have one, like I said, about the clit or whatever. And so they really recommend like, starting slow, like starting like with like, the thighs, massaging the thighs, like getting in there, waiting until like the vagina is like fully like wet and like really like wanting it, before just like going right in. And so, yeah, I recommend, watching these kind of tutorials and like, thinking more about it. The key, I think, is like presence, which I think we'll get to later, but like being present enough with your partner to be able to like read their body cues. Because if you're just going off some script that you have in your head or some idea of like some porn video that you've seen or whatever, yeah, you might just like reach down there, start going like hard on the clit, and like not understand why the woman isn't just like orgasming or whatever, you know what I mean? Like that's not how our anatomy works. So that's the clit. Treat it very gently. And if someone like, yeah, I've also had experiences where like someone's just going like really hard with like a hard tongue or something. And I'll be like, hey, can you like go really soft? Can you like kiss around there? Can you like do some light sucking or whatever? And they'll do that for maybe like 5 seconds, and they'll just go back to what they think is right, which like to me just shows that like you're not present with me. Like you're just recreating a movie that you've seen, or like a you know, whatever. You're just recreating the script of like what you think you should be doing. So that's annoying. Anyway, that's the clit. Getting into the G spot. This is like, this is the money spot. Yeah, like I've only, well, I mean, I've always been able to have G spot orgasms, but I've talked about this in my video that like the sex that I'm having now with my partner is like some of the most like life transforming, like soul affirming sex that I've been having. I've just been having like these orgasms that are just like cosmic, you know? And it's because we're like, I've never been so present with a partner before. I've never felt so safe with that partner. But also I'm able to like talk about a lot of the stuff that in other relationships I didn't feel as comfortable, or I felt like, I don't know, I had to be more exciting, so I couldn't do the things that like really give me those G-spot orgasms. But okay, so for the G-spot, I think most people know. So like, let's say like, where's my hand? Okay, here's like the front of the woman. So, you know, the vaginal cavity curves up, like up and in, like that. And so the G-spot is like at the front, like the front of that up curve. And so that's why if you're like, you know, fingering somebody, it's like you're supposed to go up and in a little bit and then do like a really soft come hither thing, because that's going to stimulate the G spot. And again, a lot of people just like ram their fingers in, start shaking it back and forth or something, or like pumping it in and out. And it's just like, this is too much. And also like, I don't know what you think I'm feeling down here, but like, it's not good. Okay. So that's the G spot, right? It has a lot of sensation. However, the rest of your vaginal walls, and this is from Shan Booty, shout out Shan Booty too. The rest of your vaginal walls have about as much nerve endings as the back of your hand. So if you're with a partner, I think there's this misconception among men that like, as soon as they put the P in the V, we're just having like fireworks go off down there. We're like, oh my God, whoa, oh, it's in, whoa, you know? And like, if you don't have a partner, I mean, first of all, I have to talk about penis shape as well to really flesh this out. But like, yeah, if you don't have a partner with like a penis shape, depending on like what position you're in, if that partner is just like hitting the wall, or like if you're kind of like a lot of men will try and like hold you up and just kind of like come in from like afar and just like go like in and out or whatever. But it's like, okay, but if you're not up and like hitting the G spot, then like that just feels like a bunch of fucking friction. It doesn't feel like anything. But I think like, you know, like women, you know, like some like women have been taught, you know, to fake and whatever, but you know, we've been taught to think that like, oh, this must be like P in the V, I'm just exploding right now, and like I should be moaning, and I should be doing this, and I should be doing this. And I think there's a lot of like disconnect, especially for young women who like start having sex and they realize that like that's not the case, and then I don't know if you had this experience, but like, yeah, when I was younger, like consuming like porn or consuming like you know, like movies and things like that showed sex in that way, and then showed the woman like immediately being like, whoa, my God, you know, I thought that like that's what it was. And then so like when I started having sex and it wasn't like that, I was like, am I just doing it wrong, or like why is it is it being really good for me or whatever, you know?
I thought my vagina was broken for like a good 2 years. Yeah,
exactly. Like, 'cause it's just like, oh, and then I would just fake. I would just be like, oh yeah, I'm loving it, because I wanted to seem like I was into it, or that I was like sexually interesting for my partner, but I didn't understand like why it wasn't just like, oh, P's in the V, and you know, I should be feeling a whole bunch of stuff which I'm not feeling. So anyway, the important thing to note is that in terms of like having internal orgasms, it also really depends on the penis shape of your partner. And there's a whole bunch of different shapes of penises that there, could exist. But some common ones are like, when it's erect, it either like curves slightly upward, slightly downward, to the left or the right. But it could curve a bit to the left and also up or whatever. And I couldn't find what was the most common, but for me, I've mostly had experience with men whose dicks were either, it could be straight as well when it's erect. So I've mostly had experience with men whose dicks were either straight, or I'd say most of them like went up slightly, just like whatever. And so for me, like that's perfect because if your dick curves slightly upwards, that's actually really great because then it like fits perfectly for front entry. It fits perfectly in like the vaginal cavity, and then like you have more chance of hitting the G-spot, which is like up here, like on the front, right? And so for me, like I can have fantastic G-spot orgasms from front entry. So that means what? Missionary. That means like me being on top. So I like missionary. I like me being on top. I like me being on top, like on the couch or whatever. And for a long time, again, like we're really socialized around like we need to be so sexually interesting. We need to like do all these things. Like there's all these jokes about how like missionary position is like, oh, like who would be caught dead doing missionary? Like that is so like lame and vanilla and whatever. And it's like, let me tell you guys, like all these like, soul changing, earth shaking orgasms that I've been having recently have predominantly been in missionary position or when I'm on top in some way, but like front facing, right? And I just want to put that out there because like, I think a lot of people are like, they have this idea, or like a lot of men will like start having sex with you and then like, they'll just immediately like flip you over to doggy, flip you over to like all these other things or whatever. And it's like, yeah, that's fine if like that dick shape aligns with my, my cavity and whatever. But if it doesn't, then like for example, like I can enjoy some different positions as well, but you need stimulation of the clit at that point, right? Because like if I'm with a partner and the dick curves upward and like my cavity goes this way and we're doing back entry, like we're doing doggy or we're doing reverse cowgirl. I bring this up because I know, Catherine, in our chat thread, you were talking about how you like wanted to do reverse cowgirl like less because you felt like it was really performative. And like honestly, like a few days after that, my partner asked me like, hey, like, do you want to like try some new positions at all? Like, did you want to try like not like because he thought like what we were doing was boring. He just thought like for me, he was worried that maybe I was bored and like maybe I wanted to do something different. And so he brought up reverse cowgirl, and I started laughing because I was like, no, that's like a purely performative position, like purely performance, right? And like I've done that position so many times and just like completely faked it. But like here's what happens, right? So my cavity is going this way, the penis is going this way, so the dick is just hitting like this part, it's just hitting the wall in a weird way, and so I'm feeling absolutely nothing. And so
I like to say like take your do like the blowjob like gesture, and it's like that's basically what it feels like, it just doesn't really feel like much of anything. And I think too, this is where the information about the clit is really important, because in my experience a lot of times when a guy wants to get behind me or something, like they may have the education to know that I'm not going to get off without that clitoral stimulation, but they're going in really hard and they're rubbing like right on it. And I need more of like a general pressure. And there's ways that I can get off, and it's actually an amazing orgasm, but like I have to have control and it has to be slower.
No. I don't know what's happening.
Not sure. Try your settings. Well, she can't hear me. I just realized.
Should I leave and come back?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I'm like, oh yeah, that's not going to help. So anyway, yeah, like one of my favorite things to do is to use, I have one of those little silver bullet or like egg type vibrators, and to be like bent over my bed, but I always tell them like, you have to go very slow. You have to like let me set the pace. I need to stimulate myself. So I think like we can see where a lot of this information, you can start putting it together to have a really enjoyable sexual experience, but you can also put it together to understand why certain things aren't working for you. And I know my vaginal canal is like shorter. I think it's on the short side. So I actually don't like a really big penis. And I have to be really careful about certain positions with someone with a penis, like going really hard, going in all the way, because I'm really prone to UTIs. And it just hurts. Like someone will be hitting my cervix and I've had like cervical bleeding afterwards. So there's just so much like, everyone's built differently. And this idea that everyone wants like this like straight, huge fucking dong and that's what works is not true. I've had amazing sexual experiences with actually someone who had a very, very short penis but had like a really big tip to it, and oh my god, it was so much fun. So it's just been very clear that like understanding the anatomy, and even more so just listening to the other person and paying attention and trying things, and I just think always starting slow is really important.
No, exactly. That's so true. Like, even like, I know, you know, my partner being socialized under toxic masculinity was like really like, you know, I don't know, I had a lot of shame or like insecurity around his penis, even though it's like absolutely perfect. But yeah, like because it like curves upward, it's like, it's perfect and it fits perfectly. And like, it always gets my G-spot. So I'm like, that's perfect. Like, I don't know, like it's amazing to me. You know what I mean? But yeah, so like, if your penis curves down, then maybe back entry positions would be better for you to reach the G-spot, right? So it really actually depends on your anatomy and like the anatomy of the person that you're working with. And always, you know, like talking to your partner and asking what, you know, feels good and whatever. And because, you know, like I bring this up because, like porn socialized me into thinking that like I needed to be doing so many different positions and like that would be like really sexually exciting for my partner. And like, I was not paying attention to the fact that like I wasn't enjoying it, you know what I mean? And I think that's just so incredibly damaging. Like when we put on a performance for another person. And so I just empower you, like, if you can have really great deep G-spot orgasms in missionary, like don't feel ashamed that you're having missionary sex, like, you know, because like the excitement to me is in the connection. Like the excitement to me is in that presence and that vulnerability with your partner. Like the excitement is in like being so close to somebody and like sharing that passion, you know? And so like whatever position you're in, like whatever, because I don't know if anyone's seen this video. We kind of talked about it a bit, but like I think Hitomi, I don't know how to pronounce her last name, but has a video called Sacred Sexuality and like some other videos around sex. And I would really recommend the videos because like, yeah, she talks about a lot of important things. But like she was like, oh, I have some like tips for some new positions for you guys to try. And the positions were both rear entry positions. And one of them was like basically reverse cowgirl, but like on a small chair, like on a couch kind of a thing. And I was like, girl, come on. But like there was no discussion. And like maybe you try that and like you fucking love it. Like maybe you try that and like your partner is able to like simulate your clit at the same time and like you love it. But like there was no discussion around like the anatomy or like maybe this won't work for you or like this might only work if you're also stimulating the clit in this way. And so I think like when that's put out, like that can also make women feel inferior or like, oh, you know, what I'm offering isn't as exciting as like what other people are offering because like I just don't enjoy these things. But you know, like once I told my partner that like reverse cowgirl was a completely performative position for me, like he didn't want to do it. Like he's like, well, I'm not excited to do something that I know that you're not getting pleasure. Like it's really exciting to me when like I can give you so much pleasure and like I just see that you're enjoying it and like whatever, you know, like that's the exciting part, right? So yeah, I just wanted to bring all that up.
Yeah, and I think there's like, Catherine, go ahead. I lost my train of thought. It's like I definitely had something to say and I lost it.
Yeah, and I think that it comes back to the most important thing is just being able to listen to your partner and to really ask them what they enjoy and what works for them. Because I know for me, for example, my orgasms are always internal and they're not so clitoral, and I think that's less common. And I have found that it's really frustrating because I've tried to explain, oh, this is what I like, or this is what I don't like, and a lot of the time people get really offended, even if you're trying to express it in like a nice way. Or with one guy, his response was like, oh, well, it's so much better if I'm able to do what you like without you telling me, kind of thing. And I'm like, yeah, but most of the time that doesn't work. Like, every vagina is different, and if we wouldn't be having this conversation if that was, I don't know, it's almost as if a lot of, because of toxic masculinity, I guess, it's their ego is often so wrapped around pleasing you without actually really paying attention to what works for you. And it's kind of like there's this mental disconnect, thinking that certain things work because they've seen it in porn and they want to follow this script. Or I've even had men that have been like, oh, well, my ex really enjoyed this. And I'm like, well, I don't care what your ex enjoyed.
Also, like, she may not have. Like,
yeah,
I don't think you realize, like, how much faking is a thing.
Yes. And it's so...
Yep.
I think I definitely found as well, it was like I immediately would follow the script. It's like, yeah, the penis would be in the vagina. Then I knew that from porn, that meant that I had to start making noise. And then that noise then reinforced the fact that they thought that I was enjoying it. But then I never kind of stopped to think, wait, why am I making this noise? Is this actually enjoyable? Then I'd start like, I don't know, clawing their back, scratching their back, pulling their hair, like all these things that you see. But it wasn't in any way authentic, because it was just like, oh, this, I've got to perform that I'm enjoying you for you to enjoy me, because so many men's enjoyment of sex is like premised on making themselves feel better about themselves, about how much you're enjoying it. I don't know if that makes sense, but like, it's like,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, I always say when I'm coming, and I don't fake it, but I do fake like my overall enjoyment. I have in the past. And it's always shocking to me, like, how people don't actually just tell you when they're having an orgasm. And so I've slept with a lot of people that, like, before they realize this about me, they're always like, oh, did you come? Did you come? And it's like, that is wild to me that, like, you wouldn't know that. Both because of, like, just from the communication aspect, you know, and I've also had guys get off and not tell me that they were about to. And I just think there's something so important about communicating that. But I think when you're faking, which so many people do, that becomes like a thing that you don't do because it's inauthentic. You know, you just make a bunch of noise all the time, and then the guy just assumes that you've had an orgasm, and then that's it. So yeah, I've had to have a lot of conversations with sexual partners about, like, I will tell you when I'm coming, and, like, I need you to tell me when you're coming. Like, I had one guy get off, and then we kept having sex, and I didn't know he had had an orgasm. And then it was like 10 minutes later, he's like, I think it's funny you don't know that I came like 10 minutes ago. And I was like, we're using a condom? Like, that is really dangerous. Like, how could you not tell me? But I think a lack of communication is just so normalized in these experiences, because it's like you're both just supposed to know. Like, you're both just supposed to, like, magically know everything all the time. And I think tied into what you both were just saying is, like, also there's a lot of narrative around, like, people having that, like, one move. Like, how many movies have you seen where someone's like, oh, the thing he does with his tongue? And everyone's like, And it just creates this really dangerous narrative that everyone's body works the same way, and that you're just like a sex god or you're not. And I think, Catherine, that's why you get the people who are like, literally will tell you they don't want to hear your input about your own pleasure, because it's like, well, I just need to think I just already know, and what I'm doing is already great. And there's so much ego in that, which is like so dangerous. You know, it's again, it ties into what you're talking about in the beginning, Mexi, of this like rape culture, because I know for myself, when I have to be fake with a partner, that's when I start to disassociate, and it just sets up this whole dynamic between us, where I am just allowing myself to come out of my body in order to keep a narrative that you need going in your head.
And Yeah, and it's so common as well to hear a lot of men complain about like, oh, this girl that I had sex with last night, she was starfishing, which is like, I don't know if you hear about it, but it's kind of where a woman is just like lying on her back, like arms and legs sprawled out, but without touching, without making much noise or much showing any enthusiasm. And like in my mind, I'm like, you're complaining about this woman being like this, but you don't think to challenge yourself and think, oh, why is she like this? Should I check in?
Yeah.
Isn't this an indication that she might not be enjoying it? Should we have a conversation? Like, I don't know. To me, that just, I don't know. There's often this narrative of like, oh, the best women in bed are the most enthusiastic. Which I understand that enthusiasm is definitely really like an amazing thing to have in a partner. But at the same time, then that just makes the rest of us think, okay, in order to be good in bed, I've got to show so much enthusiasm for this thing that isn't even enjoyable to me. And otherwise, I'm just going to be considered to be bad in bed. And it's like, I don't know. I just,
Yeah. No, that's such a good point. Yeah, I just want to say I will link there's an article that I kind of learned about like different penis shapes on. I'll link that in the show notes so people can see, because there's like different positions that would feel better depending on like what penis shape you are. So like if you're trying to have more G-spot orgasms, then you can kind of like work with this. But yeah, also I want to shout out me and Maureen, who's in the chat. We did a podcast about like faking orgasms and like should you fake and should you not fake or whatever. But like, yeah, I mean, there is so much pressure to fake. And like in that, I talked about how like in my 30s, like after my fiance and I broke up, like we were in a long-term relationship, I decided like, not that I faked it with my fiance, but like, prior, like in my early 20s, like, I was definitely faking a bunch of orgasms. But I decided like, I'm in my 30s now. I'm not going to do that because like it's inauthentic. It takes me out of the equation. Like I'm not actually connecting with this person if I'm doing that. Also, I'm giving them the wrong idea. I'm making them think that like I'm enjoying it, even though I'm not, just for the sake of seeming like sexually interesting to them. But then before my current partner, like I had sex with this guy who was like, I mean, like he had been married before, he like was older. I thought that like, I don't know. I thought it would be cool, but he was like actually very not cool. And like, he did a lot of the things that like I was talking about today. Like I would ask him to like go slower or like go softer, and he would do it for 5 seconds and he would go back to this thing. He was flipping me around into doggy position, flipping me back until like I couldn't get into a groove. He was like, oh, this is what I also wanted to say about the anatomy. If you're like doing like missionary or like a front facing thing, it's really, really good to like be close to the person and like do a waving. I'm not in the camera. Do like a waving motion like this instead of like, so like if you're like the man and you're here, like to do it like that, because then you're like getting in and up like to the G spot, and you're also putting pressure on the clit. But a lot of men will just like hold your legs out here and just like come in like straight and just like kind of hold you and just like come in and like just like have it like that. And it's just like, okay, this is like awful. I'm getting desensitized. I'm not feeling anything or whatever. But he was doing that kind of a thing. And I was like, no, like I need you like closer to me. I need you doing like the wave, like whatever. But he just wasn't listening. And I had decided that like I wasn't going to fake. So I just didn't fake. And he was like visibly shaken by that. Like he was like visibly like because like he ended up coming and then he was like, oh, like let me keep going, like let me go down on you or whatever. And I was like, this isn't going to work because like you just went down on me and you were going way too hard and like you weren't listening. So he tried to do it. It didn't work. And I was just like, you know what, like whatever, it's fine. Like I still had a nice experience. Like you don't have to worry, like, because this is another thing. It's also very difficult for a woman to come with a partner on the first time because like, part of this whole performance thing, like we're socialized to not like take up as much space in the, like, it's hard to feel like as like safe as you would need to feel with a partner to like be that vulnerable and to take up as much space as you would need to actually orgasm. And also the partner doesn't know your body and like they're probably not asking questions or whatever. So like I was fine about it, but like he was obviously like really shaken. And then like I think it just made things really awkward between us that like I didn't fake this orgasm. And I just got really pissed off because I was just like, I'm too old for this fucking shit. You know what I mean? Like You know, like I was just like, if you didn't get me off, like tough, like maybe you'll have to like pay attention to me next time and like connect with me and be more present with me, and then we can go forward. But like it's such like a toxically masculine like ego thing. And then I felt bad because I was like, maybe I should have just faked it, and then like if I just waited long enough, maybe it would have gotten better. But like that's such a terrible, you know, position to be in. Like,
Yeah.
ugh.
I like to call myself a power bottom because I will like take control from the bottom to get that like wave motion going, because it's so true. Like I will indicate that is working very nicely for me, and then it's always the pullback. And I think part of it that I've part of it from what I think, but also some stuff that men have said to me, is that they're also just constantly trying not to come, which is like very annoying to me, because it's like, we don't need to fuck for an hour every time. Like, it's okay if we're having fun and things are great and we get off quickly. And I think that's part of it too, is a lot of times it's like more visually stimulating for them to pull back and kind of do the thing, but it also like helps them to like hold off on having an orgasm. And I just like really hate that it's another way that I've always felt that my pleasure is subjugated for their ego, because it's like, well, I can't get off from what you're doing though. Yeah. And you are close, which is why you keep doing all these shenanigans. So it's like, at some point, you know what I mean? Like, you're going to have pleasure from this and I'm not. So I would rather us like come together right now, because that's what I want to do, than for you to be able to brag that you lasted for 60 minutes, but doing things that didn't feel good to me.
Yeah. No, exactly.
Yeah, and I hate that there's also this narrative of, if you fake orgasms, well, that's your own fault. You should just be more honest. You should just like take this female empowerment type of thing and just like empower yourself to be as honest as possible, because a lot of the times it can actually be really scary to be like that honest in those situations. I've had people get aggressive before, and then I've also had a lot of situations where like someone is going down on me and I'm trying to say, look, this isn't working for me, let's move on. But the only way that they will just leave and like stop violating, like literally sometimes it feels like, I don't know, they're like biting it or doing something that's like actually really painful, and they won't leave by me just saying, oh, please, like, this isn't working, until I've actually faked the orgasm. So it isn't as simple as saying, oh, well, you just all need to be more honest and that would solve the situation, or like you said, Mexi, it just ends in this like ego and thing. So and
like, go ahead. I was just gonna say, like, because like so much of having an orgasm is like mental, and it is about like the connection. And for me, like, I'm demisexual, so like for me, like, a lot of what like turns me on is like having this like really, really deep, like, romantic connection with my partner, and just like being super present with him and whatever. And like the other day he was just like, oh, like, tell me what you want to do. And I was like, just love me. Like, I just, you know what I mean? Like, I just want to like exist in this like love space. And that's what like gets me really like, you know, horny and like attracted to you or whatever. But yeah, like, because it is so, you know, like a lot of it is so mental, like, you know, even though there's a lot of feeling in the clit, right? Like, if you're not like in the mental space to be there, like if you're not like really horny, then like someone just going on your clit, like it can just feel like nothing, or it can just feel like numb, you know what I mean? Like, you actually have to like really, really be there. And so I think that's why, like, you know, the kind of sex that we have that's like coming out of this like patriarchal male gazy like mode of being and like mode of connection is so unsatisfying, and it's so hard for like women to get into. And then we just feel like, oh, there's something wrong with me, like maybe I'm just like asexual or whatever. And it's just like, no, we're just not enjoying the kind of sex that we're having. And so it's like, if you want to get your partner like actually like really like into it or whatever, then like you have to be present with them, like you have to be vulnerable with them, like you have to humanize them, you have to like see them and treat them as like a human and like not a sexual object, which is like seems so obvious, but like it's not, you know what I mean? Like it's not like, cause like for us to feel safe enough to like, the reason that like the sex I'm having now is like so incredible is that like I finally feel now like safe enough to like have the sexual experience and like be fully present and be fully vulnerable and like feel really, really safe to be able to like go into all of this, right? But like that doesn't happen in like the majority of connections, you know? So
yeah, and I also think that going back to the thing of it's the hyper focus on just the clit, like there are so many other erogenous zones, your ears, your neck, like the back of your knees, your wrists, and all of these places. And I think that like we'll probably go into this more with queering up sex in general, but like stop making it all about like the penis and the vagina immediately. Like the amount of times someone has like taken me, immediately thrown me into doggy position without any kind of real foreplay beforehand, and it just expected me to like really enjoy the situation. It's like, no, there's, I don't know, I think it's so damaging that it's just this like immediate clitoral stimulation or immediate like penis and vagina, and like I don't know, I think it can be such a beautiful experience to sort of let like the foreplay carry on for like a really long time and just like explore each other's bodies in multiple different ways, and like, and it can be so like, it just makes me so wet if people are kissing me in different parts of my body and then not even touching my clit until like for a really long time. And I think that kind of build up can be so attractive. So
yeah. Well, and the wild thing is that it works for people with penises too, because that's how I go about foreplay, is like I'm like going down the body and kissing the thighs and all this stuff. And it's so funny that like men that I've hooked up with have been like, whoa, like, what, you know, what is going on here? And it's like, yeah, we all have erogenous zones everywhere. And so I think there's this like weird mutual, it's almost like the performity ends up also being a more negative experience for men, but they don't realize it, right? Because they're kind of like in charge and basing their ego on this stuff. So yeah, there's just more genuine connections that can happen. And I know for myself, like I've wanted to explore my sexuality more. I would like to have more like casual sex, because I usually end up in such intense relationships that I'm like, it would be nice to be able to just like get pleasure with other people and feel safe. But I don't, you know, and like so often, well, with cishet men, so often once that dynamic is introduced, the texture of the relationship changes and you do feel more generally objectified. I've had that experience like somewhat recently with a friend from high school. We had been in contact because he lives pretty close by, and like we've always talked about hooking up, and we were genuinely friends. Like we would always just like chat about our lives and TV shows and stuff. And then once the sexual part of it became more of a option, it just became purely sexual. And now we never talk as friends. And I've just decided like I have no interest in hooking up with him because of that.
Yeah.
And so just really, so it's like we all could be getting laid so much more often, having so much more fun. If we like, had this centered on really good communication. And I think connection, people hear that and think it means that like everyone has to be like in love or like engaged to be married. And it's like, no, I just need to feel like I'm seen as a full human being to this other person, and that I feel safe, that I can set a boundary and be heard, that my pleasure is being taken into account. And also, I'm going to say it like that, I'm not going to be treated like shit right after the guy comes, right? Because that happens a lot. Where it's like, oh, like I'm being really nice to you because I want to get laid, and then afterwards I'm going to treat you like shit. And it's like, I don't need you to fucking marry me. I don't want to marry you. But like, I also don't want to feel gross afterwards. Like you just used me, like you tricked me, and now you got what you wanted, and now like the mask is off. That's a really shitty feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredibly violating feeling.
I was complaining to Mexi and Nicole recently about an experience of just like this guy that I was seeing, but he would kind of come over. He'd literally just come in my mouth, and then it would be like, bye, see you later. And I was just like, What the fuck? Like, it feels like the most dehumanizing thing ever. Do I just exist to like guzzle your cum? I'm not your like professional cum
Yay!
like,
Yeah.
and I just was like, what the fuck is this? And yeah, experiences like that are just so common.
Mm-hmm,
And I think that's why I get so frustrated about yeah, what you were saying, Mixie, about you know, these YouTube videos like Tomi's video about sacred sexuality, which I did like. I like her, like, she seems like a really nice human being, but this kind of emphasis on sexual liberation and sex positivity, but without actually any of the conditions in society being any different to make it genuinely possible for us to be sexually liberated. And I think it can be really damaging, because people like me, when I was younger, was like, oh yeah, I'm sexually liberated, I'm going to go out and have all this sex, and I'm going to enjoy my body, but then ended up having these dehumanizing experiences because I guess I wanted to adopt this really liberated woman type of mode of being, but like didn't have the language to describe what's happening to me, didn't realize that everything was really dehumanizing. There was so many experiences I had with like condom coercion, where it would be like, oh, they didn't want to use a condom. I'd be like, no, we're using the condom. And then they would like take the condom off halfway through without telling me when they were behind me, or they'd be like, oh, I'll just put it on the tip. And I'm like, no, don't put it in the tip. Like, but then they just sort of do it anyway. And it's like, when you live in a patriarchal society, like, we can't go out telling, especially a lot of young girls, oh, you know, you're also adopt this way of being that's so sexually liberated, when without giving us like the, you know, protection and boundaries and teaching men about how not to like do this stuff to all of us. Because I think that it has led to a lot of people having really violating or like sexual violence experiences, or just like really terrible sex, which is dehumanizing and objectifying. So it's, yeah, and obviously I'm not saying don't ever go out and have like sex, but like I think we need to stop jumping straight to this like sex liberation, sex positivity for everyone thing without first like changing the conditions in society. So
oh, that is such a good point. In our chat thread earlier, Catherine, you were like, yeah, we learn how to like arch our backs and moan and like fake orgasms before we learn about like setting boundaries and like what our own desires are and all this stuff. Yeah. Like, I just think like we don't have sex education. Like, we just honestly don't have it. And so like in the absence of like really good sex education, people are just like looking to like, movies and porn and whatever. And like all of that is media that's coming out of like a deeply misogynist, very patriarchal society that, you know, eroticizes and sexualizes, you know, the objectification of women. Like it eroticizes the dehumanization of women. And so we're all over here like trying to perform this shit. And like, if you're just telling us like, if we need to be liberated, we need to like go have all this sex or whatever. We're ending up just like being completely traumatized because like the men are not being educated. Like, men are just like everything in society is encouraging men to further objectify women and to further treat us like sexual objects that are here for their sexual gratification. And so like, where's the education for men? Like, and even men who are amazing, like I said, like my partner is absolutely amazing and has done so much work. And that's why I feel so safe with him. But he's still doing work constantly on himself to like remove the male gaze from his head, to like really get rid of, you know, objectification or all of that like within him. And I think that like so many men don't realize like how much work that they need to do. Like they just think like, oh, what's the difference? Like, you know, I do respect women. Like, I don't objectify women or whatever. And it's like, you probably don't even know the half of it, you know, like you probably have so much work to do.
So much of it is so subtle and really difficult to even explain. I've had some of my worst like emotional trauma just from trying to articulate my experience with someone, and they just don't get it because so much of it is kind of subtle, or it's just so deeply layered that it's like, if you don't understand the patriarchy and how it functions and objectification and all of these things, like you're just not really going to get how deeply damaging even small, subtle things can be. And that's been really hard. I did want to say a couple things. So obviously what Mexi talked about with all of the anatomy lesson is kind of the average, but there are people, you know, I saw someone pop up in the comments saying they've never had an orgasm. That is actually pretty normal. And then there's also people who are able to have an orgasm from like brushing their teeth. Like there's, you know, Catherine has told us she can get off from nipple play, which is not something that I could even come close to doing. So I do want to just reinforce that everyone's body is different. And this is just kind of a starting point and some tips to help you start exploring. But it's not to say that if you do have a different anatomy or a different experience or your nerve endings are wired differently, that there's anything wrong with you. That's all actually very normal as well.
Yeah.
And I want to say too that performative positions can be really fun if you both understand that they're performative. Like if you both understand that they don't necessarily function towards orgasm, but if you're having a sexual experience where you're both playing and having fun, that can be really fun. Like I saw doggy style come up. That's actually one of my absolute favorite positions. When I'm with someone where we both understand I'm not going to get off from that position, or it would be very difficult for me to. But I do enjoy it if like I've just gotten off and the other person's like, I still have a lot of pep in my step, then I'm like, cool, you know, like this is fun. Let's do that. So I just want to say that it's not to malign certain positions, but it's to break this mythology that these positions do get people off just inherently without any understanding of anatomy, and that they just, you know, is like they were saying, like someone puts their dick in you and you're just like immediately screaming and like coming off the walls, and it's like that's for some people, some lucky people, sure, but for most of us that's not how it works. And then the last thing I want to say is that also the performative positions, what I found as someone whose health has been in decline for the last decade, yay me, that a lot of it can be very hard if you're disabled or if you are not very like physically strong. So it's just something else to keep in mind. It's another way that I've been made to feel like shit about my body, is that like or even reverse cowgirl has been really hard for me because I've had a lot of muscle atrophy from my illness, and it's a pretty physically challenging position to be in. And then there's other stuff too that I've just never enjoyed, like being picked up. I don't like being picked up by someone. And there's a lot of glorification of like fucking up against a wall and, you know, all this stuff that just never worked for me anyway, and just also just made me feel really uncomfortable. So I just wanted to throw that out there for my disabled chronic babes who might relate, that, a lot of the performative stuff, I think a lot of it got popularized by like dancers and like people who have that physicality that they can do stuff like this. And for, you know, the rest of us schlubs, it may not be accessible. I also, like, my chronic illness makes my muscles incredibly stiff, so I'm not very flexible, and flexibility is another thing that's like fetishized in, you know, sex media, we'll say, like TV, movies, porn, all of it. And that's the thing that makes me feel like shit. So just wanted to throw that out there, because I think there's a lot about just like the sex that makes you feel like shit, but there's also a lot about around like what kind of lover you're supposed to be, what your body's supposed to be able to do, that can also be really damaging.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I also just, so were you gonna say something, Catherine?
I can go after you.
Oh, I was gonna change the subject, so if you were gonna respond to that.
Okay, I was just gonna say, with a lot of kink stuff, I feel like there's this normalization of so much kinky sex at the moment, which can actually just be like the normalization of a lot of sexual violence. And I think there is like this performativity to that as well, because we're all taught all the time that if we need to be sexually interesting, we will have to be constantly trying new things, doing new different like kinky things, because it's all just always like normalize that is just like a normal part of sex. And I know for me, and I know you've both had experiences like this, we have had like anal rape from men just thinking it's normal to shove their dick in my ass whilst we're in doggy position without even asking me if that's okay. Or they'll like start choking me, or start like grab my hair and like push my head down on their penis. And like, it's just, there's all these things have now become kind of normalized, especially with things like choking or like slapping and things like that, without there ever being even like a question of, is this okay? And I think the same goes for penises as well. It's like a lot of people just assume that men just inherently want to have like blowjobs, want you to like lick their balls and stuff like that without even asking if that's something that they'd enjoy. And I think that it's really damaging, because so many young people, like teenagers and stuff, that I personally know have spoken about how they feel all this pressure to try all this like kinky sex now, but when they haven't even like done the basics yet, or they're still virgins. I know virgin is like a social contract, but like they haven't even had sex yet, and like immediately thinking like they have to do like X, Y, and Z. And I think like obviously it's completely fine if you do enjoy a lot of these things, but I just think we need to not have these things as like normalized as like this is inherent to every single person's sexual experience, and there needs to be like consent around these things.
There was like a while there that it was like choking was just like, oh, like this is like the hot thing to do, and like I would just like lose it. I was just like, what the hell are you fucking doing to me? Like, you didn't even ask, like, you know, you don't know if I have trauma around this or anything like that. Another position that I was going to say that is like, for me, fucking terrible. I don't know any woman who actually enjoys this, but like, again, for a long time, this was very normalized. It's called the mating press. And it's basically like you're on your back and like they put your legs up above their like neck so that your legs are like up, like whatever. And so like you're folded into this like little like, you know, sandwich, and you're just like, oh, like it's whatever. And then like their dick is like out here, just like going in and out. Like you're not on the clit, you're not doing like the wave at all. And you're just like, oh, like, I don't know. Like, can anyone in the chat tell me if you're a woman who enjoys this? Because like for a while,
I call it the UTI shimmy, because I get a UTI every fucking time someone does that to me.
So anyway, like I've just had that done so many times to me without them even asking me, just like throwing me in and being like, oh, this is so hot, right? And I'm like, this is the worst thing I've ever experienced. So actually, like when my partner and I hope he doesn't mind me telling him, when we were first like having sex, like our sex life has always been so good because he was always like super present and like whatever. But like I remember he like was like, oh, like, do you want to do this, or like, do you want me to try this or whatever? Because I don't know, maybe he thought, I think he was also like, oh, I think I had like a girlfriend who was into it. I'm like, she probably wasn't like that into it, to be honest. But anyway, he was like starting to do it, and I was just like, stop, nobody likes that. And he was just like, he was like, what? I was like, nobody. I was like, I have asked everyone, nobody likes it. Like, it's fake. It's just fake.
I really like in the chat, people are bringing up that there's a lot of men or people with penises that don't like blowjobs, and this is very true. And this is another reason that communication is so important, because there's a lot of stuff for men, we'll say, that is normalized and said to be like, oh, every dude likes this, every dude likes that. But many don't. Their bodies are just as different as anyone else, you know, as anyone else's body. So yeah, I think it's a really good thing to bring up that that's not necessarily true. Also, someone brought up like lesbian relationships, and how like these issues do seem to be less present in lesbian relationships, which is not super surprising. Although I do know queer relationships can mimic a lot of the same problems with hetero relationships, depending on like what the person's exposure has been to different media and how they've internalized a lot of like cishet patriarchy. But I remember the first time learning that like some people don't like penetration, and it was like a galaxy brain moment. I was like, what? Was my friend Lindsay, you know, who's a lesbian, she was like, oh yeah, like whenever you have sex, like you have to communicate a lot because some people don't like penetration and some people don't like this and some people don't like that. And I just was like, I like could not, it like literally was like, what?
Yeah.
And then of course I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. But it's so funny, like the second you step out of like a hetero space, it's like, oh yeah, like people like different things and people. So I wonder for some people who've never had an orgasm, like maybe you don't like penetration, maybe, you know, there's just so many different factors that maybe you haven't gotten to explore how it actually works for you. And it's really hard to do that if you're bumping up against someone else's ego. It's really hard to do that. And I think for a lot of, especially like cis women, it's really difficult because like say you don't like penetration, you're gonna have a hard time, right, with if you have a guy who's just steeped in the patriarchy to understand that there is sex that's not P and V sex.
Yes.
Like it's all sex. I also have gay male friends who don't like anal, and anal actually wasn't normalized until I just watched like a documentary about it. I think until like the 70s or 80s. It actually wasn't the primary way that like gay men would have sex with each other. So yeah, for like the gay community, there's a similar kind of pressure and assumption. Like my friend said, like he's had men just like put their dicks in his ass, and he's like, whoa, like I'm not even into that. I don't want to do that. So I think like the patriarchy can kind of infiltrate a lot of non-het spaces.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot we can learn from queer spaces about how to have really good communicative sex with each other.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned in the video that I did that, like, yeah, in hetero relationships, women are getting off like 40% of the time, and then like in lesbian relationships, they're getting off like 85% of the time, and I'm like,
and
that's
it's like
pretty
7
telling.
times a night.
Yeah, that's pretty telling.
Yeah. Like I was telling you both that I recently had sex with 2 women, and when they went down on me, I was like, holy fuck, like this actually feels good.
Yeah.
Normally when when a man goes down on me, yeah, because like I said, I've always thought, oh, I just orgasm internally and I never orgasm clitorally. But like when they did it, I was like, oh, maybe I can orgasm. So yeah, it was like an interesting moment for me. I also wanted to talk about anal in general as well, because I feel like, I don't know if you've both experienced this, but there seems to be this kind of entitlement with a lot of men that I've been with, that anal is somehow like a gift that we're supposed to bestow on them. Like, I don't know, I remember this one guy, he would keep asking like if I wanted anal, because apparently the first time I said no wasn't you know, taken seriously. And he'd always be like, oh yeah, on my birthday you can give me anal as like a birthday gift. I'm like, no. My anal like passage isn't a gift for your birthday. Like,
Ew.
This isn't something that you're entitled to. Like, I don't know, it was just so weird. And I think obviously there's nothing wrong with anal sex, but when there's this kind of expectation, or like, yeah, people assume, oh, you're really like, you're a very sexual woman, you're totally up for anal. It's like, yeah, being very sexual doesn't mean that I'm immediately up for like whatever. And I don't know, it's just like a really, and I've had the same experience with like if I'm in doggy position, like, I don't know, some men will just think it's okay to like put their thumb in your ass, or like, and I have a lot of trauma around anal related stuff from like being a child, and also from that experience with that ex-boyfriend I told you about, and like, I don't want to have to, every time that I'm engaging with a new sexual partner, be like worried that when we're in doggy position or they're behind me, that they're going to start doing something to my asshole that I don't want, or even like go down and lick it, or like anything like that. It's like, and I don't even know how to bring that up in that situation, and I don't want to. And then I also don't want to make it awkward, so it's like really confusing. But it's like, it just goes to show just how these things have become so like normalized, and like the kind of entitlement to certain parts of your body without Yeah.
Yeah, like I've always said, if you're gonna be into anal, fine, but like know what the fuck you're doing and how it all works. Yeah, and it just, I have so much trauma around that too. And it is like, I have no problem with the act in and of itself, but I do have a huge problem with the fact that like choking, blowjobs, I think in general, even though I love giving head, I think it's really dangerous for any of this to be assumed that like every single partner should do this and enjoy it and give it to you. And it also seems like anal just became such a way to police like women's sexuality, because it's like, oh, you're a bad girl if you do it. You know, so it's like you have an edge because you do something that guys want you to do, but you also get kind of judged for it if you like it and do it. And then if you don't, then you're a prude. And it's like, I'm not a prude. It just hurts. Like, I don't enjoy it. I have trauma around it. I just, maybe I could like work really hard up to it and get it to feel good, but I just frankly don't want to do that much work for something that I don't really care about. And yeah, I just had so much pressure. I had one boyfriend who was really very fastidious, like neat and very like fussy. And so the first time he brought up anal, he's like, oh, is that something you want? And I was like, no, is that something you want? And he's like, oh no, butts are gross, you know? And I was like, that fits, that's in character. So I believed him. And then he kept bringing it up, and he kept bringing it up, and he kept being like, well, I just want to make sure that you're not missing out on something you really want.
Yeah, right.
And that and I was like, I told you very firmly that I do not want it. And then he got mad because he's like, well, what if you liked it and you're just missing out? And I was like, I've tried it and I hate it. And then he got really mad because he was like, oh, you've done this with someone else, but you won't do it with me. And it just was this like, I just felt like in every relationship I had, it was this looming thing that it just was always there, that I wasn't doing this one thing for this person. And it's really a shitty way to feel. It's really shitty. And it got me to do stuff in my body that I didn't want to do, and just internalize a lot of feelings of failure for something that like really, I mean, it's hard to say what should and shouldn't be normalized. You know, I don't want to necessarily go down that road, but it shouldn't be expected that every single person is going to want to do that with you. And that should be fine. Like, it shouldn't be like, oh my God, I'm missing out on this whole huge thing. It's like, it's really not that big of a deal.
No, like, luckily that only happened with like one guy I was with. I say luckily, like it was like still really annoying and terrible. But like, luckily I've otherwise been with guys who weren't into that, because like I remember like it was like maybe like 10 years ago. I don't know if there's like, you know, different trends happen in different areas, but I feel like, I don't know, in Ontario like 10 years ago, like it was kind of like a sexual trend of like, oh yeah, like if you're doing anal, that's like so hot and whatever. And someone actually like commented on the podcast that Marina and I did, and said like, oh, I'm surprised you didn't talk about like anal, because like with the right partner and like, you know, going really slow and like building up to it, like apparently it's like you have to go so slow, you have to build up to it. Like the first day, maybe you just like, you know, touch or whatever. And then the next day it's like a slow, like it's just a slow progression of working up to it. But like the way that it's presented in a lot of like sex media is like, you're just like in the V, and then you pull it out and you're like in the A, you know? But yeah, this guy was like really like, he just like really wanted it, you know what I mean? And I started to feel like, oh, like this is something that like I need to do and like whatever. And so like I finally agreed. We only did it one time because I was like, I'll try it once, but like I really felt like completely pressured into that. And then like, it was just like, I guess he was like behind me, and then we were like doing doggy, and then he just like put it in, and I was like, oh my God, like it just felt fucking awful. Luckily it like lasted for like 2 seconds after that, and then I was like, I'm not doing that ever again, like that, you know. But like so many women are having these fucking traumatizing experiences, and like it's not okay. Like to me that's like the height of objectification and dehumanization. Like you're just treating me as this like vessel, and that like I owe you certain things, or like you know, like I'm not a human that has like wants or, you know, boundaries or like whatever, like, or like my pleasure doesn't matter. Like I'm just a vessel, and like I owe things to you because like you're my partner, you know? And like we're socialized to believe it. Like there's, you know, Like even just being in a relationship, like it's just like really expected, like, oh, we have to have like so much sex, otherwise like I don't deserve your love, or like I don't deserve, you know what I mean? So yeah.
And I've even had things like that with entitlement to thinking that they can tell me what I should do with my body, like oh, they think that I should put on a bit of weight, or I should go to the gym to get a better ass, or like this kind of entitlement to your body is mine now, so I can tell you what I want you to do with it, or the entitlement to you definitely have to send me nudes now, otherwise I'm gonna like get bored of you, and those kind of dynamics constantly, and even if it's not explicitly said, although in those cases it was like explicitly said, there is always that kind of back of your mind thing of, oh, like if I'm not performing in these sorts of ways, then they're going to replace me with like a better version of me that is going to do all these performative things that I'm not willing to do. And I think that's when it gets really damaging.
Yeah, I kind of feel that way with bottom culture. And it's something I would love to have someone come on and talk about at some point, but I've just been worried because I was like really good friends with a younger guy who's a bottom, and there's just like in gay social media, there's so many posts about like, oh, going on a date with your bottom, but then he's eating this, and it shows someone eating like some big gnarly nasty meal. And there's just so much policing around like what bottoms can eat because the expectation of anal sex is there. Because there's like, I don't know if you two are familiar, but there's like a whole culture around like how you're supposed to eat and like things you're supposed to do the day of, you're going to have anal sex. So you're supposed to eat like oatmeal all day and like douche and do all this stuff.
I had no idea. That sounds
me neither.
So it's like, it just, as, I don't know, as someone tuned into this kind of thing, it was really interesting and also a little concerning to see this like tops feeling this entitlement to a bottom's body because of what they expect to be receiving later. Mm-hmm. And just the general policing of how people eat, because, eating disorders are pretty prevalent, like gay male culture, as they are in like cis women culture. And so to see all this stuff where it's just this constant like talking about what someone's eating and the role that they're supposed to perform in a sexual situation just struck me as very uncomfortable and very potentially damaging. Mm-hmm. So something to explore more with a bottom. But I just think it kind of links in, Catherine, to what you're saying is like, because, tops have like a certain role in gay culture, and I feel it's very similar to how like cishet men look at their women and feel entitled to like their bodies and what they're doing with them, mm-hmm. which is like mm-hmm. very concerning.
Yeah, it was really interesting because on my video about sex, I had a lot of gay men comment and say like, this really spoke to me, even though I'm a gay man, but that like, honestly, like this, like objectifying male gaze is also carries over into some, like a lot of gay spaces as well. And I was like, damn, like that just makes me sad that like this is so pervasive.
Like it's a thing for a top to want the bottom to have a huge dick, and for the bottom to be hard the whole time, which is like puts a lot of pressure on the person who's bottoming, because it's not necessarily like you wouldn't necessarily just be hard the whole time, but the top wants to see that because they take it as part of like a commentary on their performance. And for a bottom to need to have a huge dick, it's just literally like toxic masculinity. It's I want to top this guy with like a big dick to like show what a man I am. And there's just it just makes me sad to see how much of this just gets translated into like gay male spaces in a different way. And then people are still dealing with like a lot of insecurities and a lot of, I think, a lack of autonomy or feeling of like that respect for their bodies from their partners.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
I also feel like a lot of the time it's kind of this expectation that men can take out their emotional insecurities or their feelings out on your body. So I don't know, it's quite common to hear like, oh, I've had a really stressful day. Now I need to orgasm. Like I need to have sex with you to de-stress, and it's like it's kind of expected that you will do that labor to de-stress them from their difficult day that they've been having or whatever it is. And I think that like that's really damaging when there isn't that, when that becomes like the norm and expected. Obviously it's fine if you want to do that and you actually really like enjoy that, but when I've definitely had situations where I've been like, oh well, I guess he's in a bad mood now, so I'm gonna have sex with him because that's what he really wants right now. That's the only way he's gonna not be in a bad mood and be aggressive and like not actually wanting it, not being turned on in any way, but just like, okay, this is de-escalate the situation. Like, I don't know. It's just, yeah.
Yeah. That's completely damaging and just, I don't know, like really telling, because it's just like, okay, so in that instance, like you're literally just viewing my body, like you just want to masturbate with my body. Like you're just literally like, I need to come, you there, like come facilitate my coming. Like, it's like, you're not even treating this as like a mutual experience at all, or like an experience of like, you care about my pleasure. Like we're doing this because like, we're both like enthralled about this or whatever. It's literally just like, I have this like mechanical need and you will be the tool that services the mechanics of this. And like, there's nothing more dehumanizing than that. Yeah.
Molly asked a really good question. I don't know if we're fully, what's the word I'm looking for? Whatever, educated to answer it. But do you think it's possible for people with sexual trauma inflicted by cis men to be in a sexual relationship with a cis man without being continually re-traumatized? I guess it's probably about communication. So, Catherine, I don't know if you want to speak to that. I have a few thoughts, but I just thought it was a really good question in general.
Yeah, if you go first, I'll have a thought.
Well, I just think, so first of all, from my own experience, I've had a lot of partners that I've had extremely good sexual experiences with. And yes, it did tend to be, so I think it's people who are probably queer and don't know it, first of all. But regardless of that, I think it's people men, I will say, who have, they tend to be like softer and more feminine and just sort of more outside of what is considered traditionally masculine. So they have a bit of experience, like experiencing the patriarchy and toxic masculinity with their own expectations. Now, this can go either way. I've met men like this who try to reinforce their manliness by doubling down on patriarchal behaviors. But for me, I've had really good experiences with people who just seem to be curious, and who seem to kind of know that a lot of this rhetoric is just bullshit and don't really buy into it. So I think it depends on the person that you're with. And I do think for sure communication is a huge part of it. If they can just make you feel safe and heard and can be really with you as you're trying stuff out, I think that can go a really long way to healing some of that trauma and also just not feeling re-traumatized while you're in that relationship. I have also heard, and this is something maybe Catherine, I don't know your level of experience, but there is a lot of therapy out there with like BDSM and stuff where people are able to work through trauma through really healthy, well-conducted BDSM relationships. So just want to throw that out there. It's something I don't think that I particularly would enjoy, but I find it very fascinating and I think it's really cool. And I do understand the psychology of it. You're kind of able to work through things that might have been traumatizing and rewire them as pleasurable, or to confront some of the fears that you might have around sex in an environment that's like just built on consent and communication.
Yeah, I think it's a really great question. And I think, yes, it is possible to have non-traumatizing sex after experiencing sexual violence. But I think it's also really important to be completely honest with yourself and like honest with your partner if you're able to, and to really do a lot of the internal work if you can by yourself or with a therapist. To kind of work through a lot of things, because there were so many ways in which I was replicating a lot of the trauma dynamics that I had from childhood, that like in my sexual relationships, without even realizing it or fully being honest with myself about that. And then that was super damaging. I think a lot of us end up replicating the same power dynamics of our childhood or of our abuse situations again and again and again. And that was certainly the case for me. I think that I have been able to do some work around, for example, with like strangling or like choking, because it was a big fear of mine, or was really manipulated into me as a kid, that I was going to be strangled by this predator. I found it kind of to be a form of release when someone chokes me quite hard, for it to feel like I don't know, it's hard to explain, but it's like it's the same fear that I've had for a very long time, but then I'm doing it in a way that enables me to be in control. And it kind of feels like I'm taking back some control that I lost as a child. And I know for some people that could be damaging. And I'm not saying this is like a good solution for anyone, but just for me personally, there have been ways to like acknowledge the kind of traumas that I had and then take back control, or I'd just be in certain positions or having certain types of sex but then being able to say no and being able to like be fully in control feels like really like I'm taking back like power in some way. So I do think it is possible, but I found like masturbation practices really helpful as well. So that when I'm masturbating or when I'm having tantric sex, it can be really helpful as well. Like tantric sex is kind of like a meditative type of sex. And I found that has helped me prevent myself from disassociating. So like the more that I spend time when I'm masturbating, feeling fully in my body and like feeling like really taking the time to spend every moment fully feeling every sensation in my body can prevent me from like getting triggered, because often in the past I've been having sex and I'll have flashbacks to certain traumatizing experiences. I'll be completely out of the moment, or I'll disassociate like above my body and things like that. And I think through doing these kind of practices, it's also been really helpful. So yeah, I think it is possible, but I think that it's like, one, it's difficult to find a cis man who's actually going to be respectful and really like give you the space to be honest and communicate and like just like be a good sexual partner in that sense. And I think having a good therapist can also be very helpful for this. But yeah, I'm sorry, I don't really have like a set answer, but
no, I think that was really helpful. I know that I've had sex with people who were sexually assaulted as children. And I think something that's really important, being the person in the other position, was being able to clue into when that person was disassociating and say like, hey, what's, checking in and being like, I'm a little concerned, like, let's stop for now. And kind of building back up slowly, because that happened the first time I hooked up with this guy. I could tell his eyes went glassy and he just like wasn't there. And we were just making out, but he was like not there. And so I brought it up and, he disclosed to me, and then we worked in a way that was like very much not like sex was not the end goal and orgasm was not the end goal. It was literally just like being intimate together in whatever way felt safe and good at the time, and just tons and tons and tons of communication. Every time I did something to him, I asked beforehand, and then would check in during to make sure that like it was okay and he was still with me. So as Catherine was saying, I think like the other person has to be as invested in not traumatizing you and in helping you with that project as you are. It can't be just your thing, which I think is why masturbation can be so helpful, because then you have more control over the situation. So yeah, I think it is, because he told me, like, he's like, this is actually the first time I've ever enjoyed sex, and this has been like really wonderful for me, and I feel like more in my body and stuff. But it took me being that concerned about like his experience for that to happen. And I know that can be kind of hard to find. especially with cishet men, because I think the danger there, and not to, I think there are plenty of cishet men who could do that work with you for sure. It's just with so much built around men's egos, it can be a bit hard, because I think this could be another place where they want to think their magical dick is going to like heal you. And it has to really not be about them at all. It has to be just about you and the safety that you're feeling and the trauma that you're working through. So
I definitely feel like there's often a lot of people who've experienced that kind of trauma who have a deep sense of worthlessness, and I think that a lot of that worthlessness then resulted in me having sex that was incredibly dehumanizing and objectifying, but not really realizing it to be that way. I just thought it was completely normal. And actively sort of seeking out partners that were incredibly abusive, because it's kind of like that sense of worthlessness makes you feel like that's all that you deserve. And I think, so yeah, that's why I think it is so important to try and heal a lot of this stuff first, if possible, before like engaging in these kind of situations. And then the worthlessness can make you think like, well, I'm not going to leave this situation because their needs are more important than my own. And it's all just a mess. And so I would like, I think at the moment I'm having like a period of celibacy, just to like kind of focus on myself and heal for myself a little bit. And I think that can also be really empowering. I feel very sexually liberated now, even though I'm having the least sex of my life. So
I love that. And I just wanted to say too, I think someone brought it up, Molly, I don't know if it was you, but also accepting that certain sex acts might just be off the table because of trauma, and just being like okay with that. Like for me, I don't know if anal will ever be on the menu, so to speak. But I know if it ever is, it's going to be with a partner that literally does not care about it at all and has never asked me about it. And it'll have to come after like probably years of us having an incredibly like healthy, close, healing relationship. So I think we get shamed for not wanting certain things, but I just empower you. Like there are people out there that will be completely fine with that and will not feel like your relationship is lacking because there's certain stuff that you just never want to do. And that's completely valid.
Yeah.
Well, ladies, how are we feeling? Because we're an hour and a half in. We've got some really great questions. And I know we had a couple more things in our notes, although I think we've hit on a lot of it.
Yeah, I definitely just want to hit on this like Adrienne Marie Brown stuff as kind of like an antidote, but I don't know if we're done talking about like the problems. I know one problem I wanted to bring up was that I think like the internet is really changing the game, especially for a lot of young people, and like absent adequate sex ed and like education around consent, I think it's really gonna like just mess a lot of kids up. And I feel a lot of like empathy and compassion for them, because I know like, I don't know if it's okay to say this, but okay, I'll just say a friend is teaching sex ed to high school students, and you know, kids, like young girls who are like 13 years old, right? Like some of them are just like prepubescent and whatever. And they're already being harassed by all the boys in their class to send them nudes, you know? And like, talk about objectifying and dehumanizing. Like that's like, if I'm interested in a person and like that's something that he sends to me before we've like gone out, or even if we've like gone out but like we're not really like there, and like he's just like pressuring me, or like even just like saying like, hey, send me news or whatever. Like I don't think people realize like how actually objectifying that is. And then you're just like, ugh. And then if you're young, like you obviously feel a lot of pressure because you're just like, well, I like this guy, like, and I guess like, you know, we're just taught that we owe men sex, or just like if we want men to love us, and it's like they don't even love us, like they're treating us like objects, but we've been taught that like that's love. Like we've been taught to confuse like love with like this lusting and whatever, staying with us to use our bodies or whatever, and we're just like, oh, we need to do that. So I don't know if there's any like young people watching this or whatever. I really empower you to just be like, that is not okay, and like you do not get to objectify me, you know?
Yeah. I'm also going to let you in on a secret of age, as I am the most mature person probably here. Men love bitches. Honestly, you can be as big of a fucking cunt as you want to be, and you'll have people like following you around. It's something I wish I had learned younger. That like I've had friends who are like I had a friend who was telling me that there's this guy at work who wanted to date her, and he like told her that he wanted to date her, but he was still kind of in a relationship. And she was like, I'm not doing anything with you. Don't talk to me again until you're single. And she just like walked away. And he like broke up with his girlfriend and like came to her and was like, okay, I'm single now. And she's like, all right, you can take me out on a date. And I just was like, why don't we all fucking do this? Like, there's just so like you realize that guys push boundaries and they create this environment of scarcity and like, well, no, it's an environment of competition. It's actually the opposite. So it's like they create an environment of abundance for themselves where it's like, I'm just going to go, like, I just want to sleep with people and I want to see who will do what for me. And so you get into this thing where you're like, oh, I have to get one of these guys and I have to keep them by staying interesting and performing and doing all this stuff. But some of the girls out there, man, they know what they're doing. They're just like, fuck you. I'm amazing. Like, you're going to do all this stuff for me. And I'm not saying like necessarily being a bad partner. You know, I don't mean like be a bitch in the sense that you're like treating someone else like shit, but just that they're like, don't even talk to me with all this shit. Like they just don't put up with it. And they always like, these are the women who are usually married in a happy relationship. So anyone watching, whatever your gender, don't be afraid to be a fucking bitch and just like have boundaries. I don't care how old or young you are. Like you'll find someone who just absolutely loves that about you, and you'll start off your relationship with them being like, this is a bad bitch. Like, I know not to cross this person because they won't put up with it, you know? My best friend's kind of like that. Like she used to date a lot because she was trying to find a long-term partner. So she was like, she's very funny. She's very much that kind of manager personality where she's like, we're gonna make a plan. We're gonna execute the plan. We're gonna do it. So she was just dating all the time, and she just had such high standards for herself. And she would go out on a date or two. She'd be like, nope, not feeling it. She had like a pre-made text she would send people that was like very polite but very firm of like, best of luck to you. She's like, I always include a personal detail from our date, and you know, and then she would release them, and she is now happily married. It took a while, but I just think like we just have these, I know I did, like definitely have these like scripts in our head that we have to be really accommodating and then hope someone loves us enough that we can eventually like be ourselves. And I'm telling you now, as an old ass fart who like, I'm still pulling in hot like 20 somethings. I don't know why. But it's like a lot of it's because I act the way I want to act. I do what I want to do. I tell people like I love my life. I don't need anyone else in it to be happy. And it's amazing that like you'll be very well loved. Like you don't have to accommodate everything to be accepted by people.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, we're just taught to like play these roles. Is it okay if I get into the erotic or
yeah, go for it.
Okay, so this is coming from Pleasure Activism from Adrienne Marie Brown. So I just wanted to talk a bit about this because she talks about like the power of the erotic, and she talks about the erotic as this feminine coded thing, although she says it's a non-biological feminine that all bodies can access. But yeah, it's this more like feminine coded thing that's like you know, deeply about like connection, deeply about, you know, tapping into our power, tapping into our desires, tapping into our pleasure, and like our joy, and like really honoring like our sacred yeses and honoring our sacred nos and all of that. And she contrasts that to the pornographic, which to her, like she describes as like the plasticized, like the objectified, the disconnected, like, you know, I'll read some quotes here to really kind of like flesh this out. And I hope people understand what I'm saying by that, or what like she is saying by that. Like she also has pieces about like, you know, the power of pornography, like there's different kinds of pornography that we can have, right? But like I hope people understand that we're talking about this like very like hyper patriarchal, like disconnected, male gazy way of like viewing sex and bodies and each other. So I just want to read a few quotes that I thought were fire, and then Yeah. So she says the erotic has often been misnamed by men and used against women. What's so funny?
Sorry, Maureen. Maureen said, I believe you once said, watch them turn into weeping babies, and it's true.
Yes.
About being a bitch to people.
Yeah. No, I definitely... more recently in my life, I've actually like definitely been that person as well. Anyway, so she says, the erotic has often been misnamed by men and used against women. It has been made into the confused, the trivial, the psychotic, the plasticized sensation. For this reason, we have often turned away from the exploration and consideration of the erotic as a source of power and information, confusing it with its opposite, the pornographic. But pornography is a direct denial of the power of the erotic, for it represents the suppression of true feeling. Pornography emphasizes sensation without feeling. There are frequent attempts to equate pornography and eroticism, two diametrically opposed uses of the sexual. Because of these attempts, it has become fashionable to separate the spiritual, psychic, and emotional from the political, to see them as contradictory or antithetical. In the same way, we have attempted to separate the spiritual and the erotic, thereby reducing the spiritual to a world of flattened affect, a world of the ascetic who aspires to feel nothing. But the dichotomy between the spiritual and the political is also false, resulting from an incomplete attention to our erotic knowledge. For the bridge which connects them is formed by the erotic, the sensual, those physical, emotional, and psychic expressions of what is deepest and strongest and richest within us, being shared, the passions of love in its deepest meanings. And I thought that was just really apt. And she talks a lot. She talks a lot about like the power of the erotic is like the power of sharing that, you know, like the power of sharing deeply, very deeply with another human, and like having that kind of mutuality, that deep connection, that deep authenticity between you two. And I just wanted to follow that with like this, I think, is the best quote I've ever read about like all of this stuff, because it really captures, I think, a lot of the sex that we are taught that we're supposed to have, a lot of sex that I've been having in my life. And it really, I think, captures the difference between like male gaze sex or like objectifying sex, dehumanizing sex, and this more like powerful, maybe like, you know, feminine coded, like deep eroticism that I think would be like an amazing antidote to this kind of like patriarchal bullshit. So she says, this brings me to the last consideration of the erotic. To share the power of each other's feelings is different from using another's feelings as we would use a Kleenex. When we look the other way from our experience, erotic or otherwise, we use rather than share the feelings of those others who participate in the experience with us. And use without the consent of the used is abuse. In order to be utilized, our erotic feelings must be recognized. The need for sharing deep feeling is a human need. But within the European American tradition, this need is satisfied by certain prescribed erotic comings together. These occasions are almost always characterized by a simultaneous looking away, a pretense of calling them something else. And this misnaming of the need and the deed give rise to that distortion, which results in pornography and obscenity, the abuse of feeling. When we look away from the importance of the erotic in the development and sustenance of our own power, or when we look away from ourselves as we satisfy our erotic needs in concert with others, we use each other as objects of satisfaction rather than share our joy in the satisfying, rather than make connection with our similarities and our differences. To refuse to be conscious of what we are feeling at any time, however comfortable that might seem, is to deny a large part of the experience and to allow ourselves to be reduced to the pornographic, the abused, and the absurd. Isn't that amazing?
I love it.
I just felt like that captured so well, like so much of like what I like just like viscerally felt inside me of like why I was so angry at this like very patriarchal, like male gazy idea of sex, right? Because it is a simultaneous looking away, and like, you know, I have had so much sex that like I was actually dissociating. Like I was the person with the glazed over eyes, like picturing something in my head, just like trying to like not look at the other person, right? And she writes that like, you know, like I think it was until my 30s that I really actually was able to like have these experiences and like not look away. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Actually, really like be there. But I think also like that's why you know, sex with my partner has been such a like you know, a great experience for me is because like he's also completely present with me, like he's not looking away, right? And you can feel that, like you can feel when the other person is looking away or when they're there with you. And I think that like so much of this like male gazy sex where people are just trying to replicate like what they've seen in videos or whatever, like it is so disconnecting. And like I just think like a great way forward is like to reject this like patriarchal like reductionism, you know what I mean, and just like to move into this like fully embodied and like authentic pleasure and connection with other people. And it's difficult to do because everything in our society has socialized us against this and is very vulnerable, and it's difficult to feel safe enough to not look away, you know. And so you really have to practice that like safety and consent with your partner so that you do feel safe enough to not like look away. But to me that was just like mind blown, you know. Loved it.
Yeah.
Gapnap said shutting that book felt like a mic drop.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do think there is so much truth to the fact that like patriarchy and our sex lives, like it really feeds into each other. Like if you're having the type of sex where you're just believing that femininity is submission, it's all about giving them what they want, and then that really feeds into how you act in day-to-day life and how you view yourself. Like when I was having that kind of sex and then still going to work every day, it felt really strange being like in a room alone with my boss, because even though he was like a really nice person, I still had this sense of this like deep objectifying feeling and this deep I am less than, I am not as important as this man. And I think a lot of that had to do with the type of sex I was having at that period of time. And I think that like, yeah, they both feed into each other in so many ways. And then of course that also gives men this like this idea that like they can dominate, they can view us as like less than. And like not just us, but if they start viewing like women that way, then it also leads them to view like other beings that way, like animals and like other categories of people that are marginalized. So I think it like, yeah, like these most like intimate moments feed into so many other aspects of our lives. And and then when I was having a really great sexual experience with this one man, I then felt so much more like human and like I had so much more worth and was able to then bring that into other areas of my life. So like, yeah, I don't know, I just think it's just so important. So
Yeah, it definitely does. I know once I kind of discovered my sexual power, I just like the way I engaged with everyone was so different.
Yeah.
Because there is a sense that like, because I found my power in myself and not in men. And then the way I navigated like male spaces was just so different, because I was like, I don't need your fucking approval. Like, I know what I've got, you know? And so even in like a professional setting, it just really changed the way that I showed up in my own life, you know, and the way that I would advocate for myself or think about my value as a person, and also what I would accept from other people.
Yeah, my daily masturbation like sessions are just like the most incredible times for like just feeling so amazing in my body. And then like, I don't know, that fact that I can give myself all of this pleasure, it's like I don't need to rely on anyone else for this. And like it's just such a like beautiful, almost spiritual time for me. And yeah, and like I love it.
I love that. So I think we could start wrapping up. I just wanted to end with a little lesson on queering your sex that really is just a summary of what we talked about today. And this is something I would like to make a regular part of these conversations. We also want to do more anatomy lessons in the future so that we can learn about different body parts. But before I get into this, I want to say, you know, every time I bring up like queerness as a tool for everyone, you know, somebody pops up all mad, saying that like the straights shouldn't be able to use queerness or shouldn't have access to it. And it makes me furious. So I just want to like reiterate like why I think this is such a powerful tool. And it was really helped. I'm glad I was listening to Scene on Radio last night, and I'm listening to their series on like men. And they were talking about how, you know, they had one episode which was like, what is masculinity for like non-white men? And they were talking about things like how Asian men were very horribly like demasculinized in US culture, and literally by like laws that we had in this country that prohibited them from marrying outside their race and tried to make marriage in general very difficult for them. And then they had Black men on to also talk about what Black masculinity in the US looks like and the ways that that has also been hijacked by white supremacy. And so what I want to say to you is like, if you are like a non-white person, your whole identity around your gender and sexuality has already been queered by white supremacy. White supremacy is telling you, you need to perform in this way to get proximity to whiteness, to even have a chance at being accepted, or else we just see you as queer. And that is very real. So we can sit here and try to gatekeep around who gets to use this word or who gets to use this tool. But the reality is that for anyone who's not adhering strictly to a white, Christian, cishet, patriarchal view of personhood, you're already queered by the system. Ask any guy, any like, you know, guy who wants to wear nail polish or do some other gender non-conforming things, or just has like a softer energy, someone who doesn't present in a typically masculine way, he is queered by other people, right? He's going to be accused of being a homosexual or being something different and not fitting in, not being one of the boys. You have that with women. It's not, I think, often as extreme, but like if you're not like feminine, then you're going to be queered as well. So it's really silly for us to try to keep this word, which literally just means like outside the norm, you know, against what is considered societally like acceptable, from people that are going to experience the world in a queer way, regardless if we allow them to use that word or not. So what I'm trying to say is like queerness has been weaponized against certain groups of people, but it can also be a tool of liberation. And I think it's really violent for us to tell certain people that they may have queerness weaponized against them, but they can't use queerness to liberate themselves. I don't agree with that at all. So if you hear from people, send them my way and I'll talk to them. But I'm done with this bullshit, because queerness, honestly, to me, is like the most powerful way for us to combat all of these things. Thank you. Yes. So I think today the lesson we could take, I do want to do a whole episode about consent, but I will say that consent is the bedrock of queerness. Consent is in every piece of anything that could be considered queer. So consent, communication are always a good starting point for, you know, queering your sex. But I think for today, really what I wanted to talk about was how we can stop performing in the sex that we're having, and even in the way that we think about the sex that we might have, in the way that we even masturbate. Because I think we can sometimes still perform even when masturbating. I know I've caught myself doing that sometimes, or I might think about like, oh, how would this look to someone else? Or like, sometimes I'll make a lot of noise to be like, oh, what do I sound like when I'm making all this noise? And that can be fun. I don't think that's inherently wrong, but, you know, I've caught myself like having other people in my head when I'm masturbating, which really should be a time for me to just kind of have fun with my own body. So I don't know if you two have any thoughts about like how we can stop performing with each other, but that for me was sort of the big takeaway from today, is start practicing being in your body, communicating with your partner. I think if you have a partner or partners, I think asking them, can we like fool around and kind of not have an orgasm be the end goal? Can we just sort of touch each other and explore and like just have a time where we're sort of naked and engaging with each other, but not need it to have some, like you can even set a timer and say for the next 30 minutes, we're just going to like play with each other and have that be that, or play with ourselves and watch. My favorite thing in the world is to ask someone to masturbate in front of me. I learned so much about like, and I try to coach them, like, don't do it in a performative way, but like when you're alone by yourself, like show me what you actually do. And you learn so much about the other person's body from that, you know? So yeah, those are kind of my notes that I have off the top of my head. Ladies, do you have any ideas?
Let me think.
Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I was just like,
I mean, that could, maybe that's it. I just didn't know if you had anything to add.
I think that I found that with masturbation, it can be so helpful just to really allow yourself to use your imagination, which I know like
Yes.
so many people are so like, I don't know, we're always taught that you don't masturbate until you watch porn, or you have to have some sort of like stimulation like that you're seeing. But I think it can be so amazing just to see what comes up for you with your imagination, because like that's when I started realizing that I'm definitely not straight, and like actually a lot of what came into my imagination was women or non-cis men. I was like, oh, this is interesting, maybe I should look into this more, whereas before I'd like never even like questioned that before. Or sometimes maybe this is weird, I don't know, but when I masturbate I imagine myself on top of myself, and like it's kind of like a form of masturbation, like because it a form of self-love, because it makes me feel like, I don't know, viewing my body in my imagination as like something that's really attractive, rather than before I would always, I don't know, rather than being like really self-conscious about what I might look like. And I know Adrienne Maree Brown talked about this in pleasure activism, of like filming herself and then watching those films while she was masturbating, and like seeing herself as like someone that is really attractive, rather than like all these images that you normally get of what is supposed to be deemed attractive. And like, I don't know, I think those kind of things can be really, really helpful. And then also, yeah, anything that's like practicing boundaries, even practicing boundaries and consent in like the smallest everyday things with people and friendships as well, because often we don't really think about having boundaries with friendships. And like the more it becomes part of your like day-to-day practice, the easier it is then to do it in like sexual situations. I find that can be super, super helpful. And then also just like asking yourself, like, what would like a true sexual liberation look like for you? What like would an amazing orgasmic like situation be like? What would like it feel like to have this deep yes to a sexual situation, rather than like, oh no, maybe I'll just go along with this? Like, what would that actually look like? And it's often very like intriguing, the type of things that come up for you that you otherwise like, I don't know, I think we should get used to asking ourselves these questions more often, and like, yeah, expanding what is possible for us.
I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that too. Yeah, so I'll say I agree with everything that everyone's brought up. I would say also for me, like even things that aren't sexual, but that help me more with like my presence, like meditation or just mindfulness practices and things like that. Like I feel like I finally gotten to a place where like I'm doing pretty good in terms of like mindfulness and connection and presence with myself, even without a partner. So then it helps me to be really present when I am with a partner. And like the more present you can be, like the better that experience is going to be. And I would also say like being like trying to be like as intentional as possible, like with the experiences that you're having. I feel like Catherine, as you just said, like there's so many times that we just like end up going along with something, or like if you've been in a long-term relationship, or even if you're like just starting out the relationship, it's like there's kind of this expectation that like every time that you like go on a date, like you're going to have sex afterwards or whatever. And so it just kind of becomes like kind of like mundane, or kind of these things that like you feel like in the back of your mind, like, oh yeah, it's time for that, or like whatever. And it's not as much like, it's not as like intentional, and like you're not fully honoring like your sacred yes. It's just kind of like, yeah, something that you're doing, as opposed to being like, yeah, like I really, really am thinking that like, yes, this is the experience that I want to have. So yeah, like being more intentional about that. For me, it's also been like I said, like just honoring the fact that like I am demisexual, and it takes me a while to feel safe enough with a partner to be present enough to like fully enjoy that experience and to have it not be dehumanized. So just like to honor my demisexuality and not like, you know, like sleep with someone too quickly, or like whatever, you know what I mean? And like that can get kind of like whatever, like, you know, if you want to, that's totally fine, but like just honor where you're at and like be really honest about that. because I think there's like a lot of pressure to like do things in a certain way, or like, oh, we've gone on so many dates, so like now the next step is this or whatever. But like, yeah, just like, I guess doing practices that can make you feel really in touch with yourself to the point that like you can recognize what your sacred yeses are, and like recognize what your sacred no's are or whatever, you know. So yeah, I would say that. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, and just sorry, just one more thing. Also, just completely throwing the script out of the window of like, okay, if I hadn't been given this script of like, oh, as a woman, I need to do this. As a man, I need to do this. Like, what kind of sex would you end up having? And then that can open up so many doors for like, oh, like maybe anal play, maybe like I can do pegging, or maybe like, I don't know, just like I don't have to fit into this norm of like, oh, okay, I've got to be the one that's like super submissive, because like so much of this stuff is so learned, and then you assume that it's what you actually want when, and I don't know, just like I found the concept queering our sex like so liberating. Thank you, Nicole, for introducing me to that. Of just like, like throw all these scripts out the window. I love it.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, I love that. And I would add to that, like if you're in a current relationship, you know, if you do this playtime where it's the orgasm is not the goal, and maybe even approach it as like, let's pretend, let's start from scratch, and let me ask you, like, do you like this? Do you like that? You could, if you're a nerd like me, you can make like a little checklist and go through the checklist and ask each other, like, do you like your ears nibbled on? I dated someone whose ears were super sensitive and he couldn't stand it. And then I've dated other people, like for me, that's like, hell yes, bring it on. So like you really could go through and just, and then if you reach one where you're like, oh, I'm not sure, then that could be a place where you could play together and see what you think. And even if you do know that your partner likes something, maybe ask them how they like it. Maybe you think you know, but maybe there's stuff that you don't know. You know, there's all kinds of ways that you can go about stimulating someone that have to deal with pressure and biting versus licking, and areas around that area that they might like stimulate it at the same time. So just use it as a way to be like, let's throw out any assumptions we have about each other, and let's really just like rediscover each other together in this way that's about like open communication and exploration.
Yeah,
I love that.
You know, I was just watching this Hannah Whitten YouTube video, and she said that she could make herself orgasm just from her mind, just like thinking about it without even.
I've heard
like,
of that.
Yeah, and like I said, I've orgasmed just from playing with my nipples. So like even just how amazing it would be just to have a session that's just like with someone, but just focused on my nipples and like nothing else. Like it just or even just like trying to orgasm just with our minds. Like that's amazing. I've never done it, but I really want to try.
Do you guys have it? Like sometimes I'll orgasm in my dreams. Like and I'll like, that happens
really?
So much. Yeah.
Oh my god, how do you do it? I want to try.
Like it's just my mind, I guess. Like I'm just having like a sexy dream, and then it's like I actually orgasm.
Wow.
It's like, thanks, brain.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, okay, so like it's I definitely believe it's possible to orgasm with like just thinking. So
Cool. All right. Well, how are we feeling after party wise? Are we done?
I can stick around for like a little bit longer, but then I'm definitely done.
I'm good to carry on as well.
Okay,
I'm loving
cool.
this conversation.
Yeah, I may come for like,
I know, I am too.
20 minutes or something, but then like,
that's perfect.
Okay.
And I can hang out for a little bit longer too. Okay, so I'm gonna play the outro. So we have like 3 minutes if you want to go to the bathroom, get water, whatever. So yeah, thanks for everyone who joined us live today. That was really cool. We were at 69 views at one point. Someone pointed that out. And if you want to hang out for the after party, we could maybe ask a few more questions and just hear your stories. So we will be back after this brief, wonderful bop that you're about to hear. time.
Hang on. My light is messed up. 1 second.
Okay.
Voila.
Hey.
All right, I'm just catching up on some of these comments. Thank you to everyone who showed up, and your comments were so awesome.
Mm-hmm. I'm loving this after party like glitter and stuff.
I know, yeah, it's very. I have to do this because people come on late, and then we're in the after party, and then they start bitching about how we're not talking about the topic, and it's like, girl, that was 4 hours ago. Yeah. So, yeah, so there was just so much really great stuff that came up today. I saw one about race and sexualization or desexualization, and I think that would be really cool if we could find the right people to come on to talk about that. I know that person asked for resources, so if you're someone watching this replay later, if you have any good resources on that, that would be awesome. Kayfleet, you know how we do around here. Yeah, so how's everyone feeling? How we doing? How's everyone's Valentine's Day going? Molly, I couldn't have said it better myself. It's like you got my two things that I get the most heated about in one sentence. It's just beautiful. So having that gatekeepy definition of queerness is like defining veganism by your shopping list, exclusionary and nearly completely useless.
Yeah, I love that quote that you posted about queerness on Instagram. Yes. Really good. Yeah.
Yeah. That is a person I would love to have on a show. They talked about, I actually need to look it up. They're trans masc, I think. But they were talking about ever since they've been more masculine presenting or read as a man, they've been expected to be more aggressive and vocal about what they want sexually. And they're like, that is not something that like, because their body's changing too, they're like, that's something I'm kind of trying to figure out. So it feels really weird to be put in this position. I was like, that is so fascinating. Like, I would love to talk about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you didn't see it, Mexi's referring to, I just posted an Instagram post by Stevie Writes, which is an amazing Instagram account. If you don't follow them, please do. And they say like queerness is a question, not an answer. And it's a question that we all basically can constantly ask ourselves about, what do I want for myself and my body that is separate from the demands of the patriarchy that are put on me? And I just think it's incredible way to look at things.
Yeah. No, I love that. I loved when you were talking about like queering sex and like even queering heterosex, because like, like me and my partner, like, part of the reason why like the sex is so good, I think, is because like it doesn't feel like the typical like hetero sex. Like it doesn't feel like we're following these scripts. It doesn't feel like we're playing into like roles or whatever. Like it feels like we're like two beings coming together in this like cosmic way and like really like getting into one another, you know? And like it's amazing. But like, to me that's like, it's just so different from like the typical like hetero way that sex is like presented, you know what I mean? So I would love to do more stuff to like queer our sex even more.
Yeah.
Gotta see.
I was like, I don't know. Oh, Latasha, yes. I've been watching a lot of Kat Black lately. I had watched her before, and then it's just one of those things where you're like, oh yeah, this person, I've been catching up. And people always assuming she's a dom, because that's another thing too, is like, you know, that's the age-old struggle, is like Black women having access to womanhood as it's like gatekept by white supremacy. So I think like all of this is really interesting to talk about. And that was, you know, the first time I heard that comparison of like the Black experience, like just inherently is a queer experience, was by a Black trans woman who is like cisgender, heterosexuality, like all of these things, femininity, masculinity, were all defined for white people. So they were never defined for us. And like we have always been excluded from these things. So we've always had to define them for ourselves, which is just inherently a queer practice.
Yeah, I love Kat Black. I watch so many of Kat Black's videos. Like, she's just so good. Like, so good.
She's amazing.
Yeah, I love Kat Black.
Thank you, Kristen. I thought I saw some questions, and now, of course, I can't remember them, that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, drop them.
Yeah, let us know if you have questions you haven't asked yet.
Otherwise, we can talk about anything.
Anything and everything.
We all just watched A Promising Young Woman.
Oh my god.
Oh yeah.
Which we won't spoil, but like everyone should go watch that. I know, Nick,
It's
I think
amazing.
you want to do a review of it at some point, but like maybe we could also talk about it at some point. Because
that would be cool. Yeah, I would like that.
Very apropos of the whole discussion we just had.
I think so.
Yeah.
We should do that for the next stream that we do.
Yeah,
that'd be fun.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Mm.
And then, Catherine, we can cross-promote that with my video about it. Catherine and I were just talking about, like, how to be good marketers and do this stuff in a more efficient way.
Yeah, because I'm feeling this pressure to get on TikTok, even though I really don't want to. And
See, I kind of want to, but I just don't have any time or spoons. But yeah, I think I do want to get on TikTok because that's where like fucking everybody is. Apparently, it's like really easy to post something and get like, you know, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of likes or whatever. I don't know. It's just all the kids are there.
The kids are there.
Kids are there.
Yeah, and I saw that For Harriet was talking about how what she does is she just takes clips from all of her YouTube videos and then uploads them to TikTok and like repurposing content that way. I was like, wow, that's such a good idea. So yeah, I might start doing that and like posting little segments and stuff onto TikTok. And
Yeah. I love For Harriet stuff too.
Yeah, For Harriet's amazing.
Yeah, I meant to bring it up at her stream on WAP, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was really good because she talks a lot about performance in that as well. So definitely watch that.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. I also wanted to mention, I forgot to say earlier, about BDSM and the left as well, because I think that it's another one of those things that is a bit frustrating about the left sometimes, that it's almost as if there's such an overemphasis on like absolutely never questioning the kind of power relationships within BDSM, because it's like no kink shaming, and like the conversation kind of ends there a lot of the time. And like I agree that we shouldn't kink shame, but at the same time I think we should like be critical and have a look at the kind of things involved in the BDSM community. Like I'm talking about things like daddy daughter, and that can often like reinforce kind of pedophilic type of things. And I don't know, I just think within a patriarchal racist society, like there's that can often end up being reinforced within BDSM. And like I think it's something that we should be critical of without shaming people, but like we can still kind of analyze how that plays into this community and stuff.
I think Kat Black is like really good at like talking about all of those things, because it's like, like she'll like, you know, she'll talk about it in like a nuanced way. And like I love her videos, even though like obviously I'm not into BDSM and I'm not poly, but like I love her videos because like they're all super relevant, because like she just talks so much about how like, there's so many like dudes in these spaces who will like use both poly and BDSM to just like enact their own kind of like patriarchal bullshit, like without actually like like integrating into the community in like a really great way, you know, you know, she made a video recently about like shitty doms and how like actually like in the community, like in order to become a dom, you actually have to like typically, or you used to have to like be a sub first, and like you kind of have to like earn that title for yourself, but that like a lot of shitty men are coming in and just like calling themselves doms without actually like going through and like, you know, really integrating into the community and like, you know, making sure people know that they're a safe person, and then they just like end up like abusing people because like, I mean, yeah. And she even said that like a lot of this is like reinforced by things like, you know, 50 Shades of Grey, like movies that are just ridiculous. But also like porn is also really like spectacularized around like BDSM. And then it's like giving people the wrong idea. And then they're coming into these communities to just like enact their sexual violence in the community when it's like, that's not what it's supposed to be about. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Yeah, I think she had a really interesting take about how like kink is inherently not supposed to be mainstream. And then there's been so many pieces of media that is essentially exposing and normalizing kink, normalizing in a way. It's like normalizing it, but it's also fetishizing it, and it's also misrepresenting it. So it's kind of like a mix of all those things, but it's exposing it to the mainstream. And she's like, really, kink is by its very nature not supposed to be mainstream. Like it's a queer practice. Like BDSM is a very queer practice of, you know, we're going to take the things that are taboo and we're going to explore them in this very consensual, very safe way. So it just is by its nature not really supposed to be like a mainstream thing. And yeah, this misrepresentation and this idea that men can just use this as a way to like control women. I like how she talked about a big red flag is if a dom only wants women who are young and or inexperienced, then that's like a huge red flag. And like especially jumping into stuff right away and not building up that like long relationship of like, let's talk about, you know, what you want. Let's talk about, you know, let's like build a relationship around this. And I just think like ultimately it's kind of the same criticism I have for kink, poly, and porn in the mainstream and the way that we talk about it is that just the lack of education. Mm-hmm. I think it's okay for us to all talk about these things, and I definitely think these things should be destigmatized in their own ways. But, you know, I had the experience a few years ago of like, it was a big thing in the vegan community in Mexico. I think you experienced this as well, that like polyamory, for instance, was seen as, it was seen as like you were controlling, abusive, manipulative. If you were monogamous, you weren't vegan. That was a weird thing. You weren't a real leftist. And, you know, it's like that enabled a lot of people. And I actually I was being groomed by someone who was saying that they were polyamorous. And fortunately, they did have some control over me because of a lot of things I won't go into, but fortunately, I had actually been involved in an online community, a blog that had like a really thriving comments community. And a lot of people in the comments are people who practice polyamory in a really safe and healthy way. So thank God I had enough information to know that the way that this person was going about trying to groom me for polyamory was not okay. So I just hate these like flat conversations of like, yeah, don't kink shame, but also we're never going to talk about what good healthy kink looks like or how to know if someone is performing kink in an abusive way. What are the red flags around that? And then same with polyamory. It's like that is absolutely 100% a valid relationship structure, and I fully support it, but it is something that can be used to control people or to abuse people if they don't know what they're doing. Like, Catherine, we were just talking about that, and I told you how I found out, like, you really aren't supposed to open up your relationship for one particular person, and yet that's the most common discourse you hear around polyamory is someone trying to open up their relationship because they want to date, like, one person in particular outside of their primary relationship. So yeah, just with all things, it's like education. Like we can consume almost anything. We, of course, should talk about how prolific that thing is, but with the lack of education, then you're just stepping into something dangerous.
Yeah. She made a really great video recently called like It's Okay to Be Monogamous, and in it she just talked about like all her
I loved that.
Yeah, she talked about all her experiences with like these like watching these men try and like gaslight these women into like being polyamorous, because like if you aren't polyamorous, then like you're just closed-minded, you're controlling, you're this, you're that, like you're whatever. And how it's like she was just like, no, maybe they're just monogamous, like it's not that big a deal. But like she would say like there's so many men who like will like basically just like get tired of a woman, because again, this is another part of our socialization, like, you know, you're supposed to be tired of like being with the same woman for a long time is supposed to be like so boring, and like, you know, and like especially if she's getting older, it's supposed to be like, oh, boring, gross, she's, you know, she's done, I gotta move on.
If she starts setting boundaries or having, you know, like standards for herself, that's also when women suddenly get boring or tired.
Yeah.
It's like as they get older and start to realize like, oh, you're kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
I've seen that from so many men. It's like that's why they keep dating people who like are inexperienced, because the second someone's like, oh, I now see that you're not shit, they're like, oh, you're boring, I'm going to go trade up.
Yeah, exactly. So it would be these men who are just like tired of their partners, and then they'll be like, oh, like I'm actually polyamorous, like we should do this, and if you don't do it, then like, you know, you're closed-minded and you're whatever, and then these women will be like pressured into it, and then they'll start being polyamorous, and then the man will just like date other people and then like find another woman and then just leave their relationship and go be monogamous with that woman. So like it's just like
it's like the most roundabout like I don't want to break up with you directly kind of situation.
It's just
so
like men,
weird.
like it's just like them using it to be like, I want to go womanize right now. It's just them like masking their womanizing under like this woke banner of like, oh no, I'm just like practicing this really like open relationship style, and then they'll just be like, oh wait, actually like I found someone younger that I'm gonna go be monogamous with, you know?
Yeah.
Thank you, Maya, because I knew this was a question I was thinking of. How does one get into tantric sex? I actually would like to know that myself.
I really want to get into this, so I would like to know too. Catherine?
Maybe it's something we need to do an episode on. We'll have someone tell us how to do it.
I really, really do not feel like I have enough experience to be able to talk on this, because also when I have done tantric sex, I've normally done it with like men who are just so not like. They're very toxically masculine, so it normally just didn't turn out quite as like I had wanted it to. But basically, I don't know about how to get into it, but I think I first just like watched some YouTube videos about how to do it, and like basically I started off like massaging their bodies, and then they can like massage your body, and it's like not at all stimulating any of your genitals to begin with. It's like very, very slow, and it can like take a few hours if you want it to. Just like really like being fully present. It's like a meditation during sex, and like during every part of the foreplay as well. Just like touching and kissing and caressing loads of different parts of the body. Often it like does involve some sort of massage, and then it's like every single like different sexual act is like very, very slow. So it's like with one person, it was basically I was sat on his penis for like 5 minutes or something without moving, and it's just like sitting there looking into each other's eyes, like really breathing, maybe like loosening or like tightening your vagina. But just like really feeling every single like pulse, and like it's so strange, like as you do it you feel like you're merging into their body and they're merging into your body, and it's like you're so like you said, makes it feels kind of cosmic. It feels like such a spiritual experience, and I think that it really does change your mind about sex, because it's like such a different experience from that. Usually like you're in that position and you're like they're ramming you as like hard as possible, and you're like you can't even have time to think, and like it's all just like I don't know, it's just I think it can really transform the kind of sexual experiences that you're having, and like just how pleasurable that can be even without the actual movements, and then you can like very, very slowly do other movements, like just move up and down in like a really slow way. But it also can be such a good way to kind of teach them how to please you, because like if you're doing it very, very slowly, like they can really see what you're responding to and like what exact actions are working. And like that can be really helpful. But basically, I guess it's just everything is extremely slow, very meditative. Like a lot of it is about the way that you're breathing as well, and like connecting your breaths. And but yeah, like I said, this is coming from someone, like I'm no expert in tantric sex at all, I'm still learning, but this is just how I've done it so far, and I would highly, highly recommend it. It really helped me to stop disassociating as well, because I had to like I could be really still and just like really meditate in the moment. And also it's like good for body confidence as well, because I think like sometimes I would feel self-conscious in certain positions, but if you're like really present and still with each other, it kind of forces you not to just be like, okay, I'm just like quickly going to get this over and done with, or whatever, because it's like, yeah, you're just like having to like look at each other fully for like a very, very long time. And yeah, then it can also be so amazing for the massage and everything. It just like really builds up that like you just get really, really turned on from it, because it's like a lot of foreplay and like psychological foreplay as well. So yeah.
Did you read or watch anything to kind of learn about it that you liked?
Yeah, but I don't remember the exact names of the YouTube videos. But if I remember them, I'll link them. But I just basically typed tantric sex into YouTube, and then yeah, just like
let the algorithm take you away.
Yeah.
Richard said, all three of you come in sexuality from different perspectives. Own opinion, was that by design or by chance? And do you agree that you're different? I would say it's by design and by chance. We all happen to be friends, and so that's like the chance part. But I do agree. I think we have a lot of commonality around our philosophies or politics around sex, but I do think we all have like pretty unique perspectives, which made me really excited for us to collaborate in this, knowing that like, yeah, I mean, we're three white people perceived as women, so like I'm not trying to say we're that diverse, but I just think like I knew that we also still had like pretty different backgrounds and approaches to sex, so yeah. I think that was cool of you to notice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Richard, I also think you asked earlier or said something earlier about wanting to know more about disassociating, and I actually just did a whole episode about that, so you can find that on my channel. I think it's really important, and I do talk about disassociating during sex in that, so if you wanted a resource for that, there's that, and I have resources in the notes of that if you just wanted to like read something or look something up.
I think I need to leave.
Gotta bounce. Yeah, I was gonna say it's about that time.
I've had so much fun. This was so awesome. Actually, I'm self-conscious because I think my teeth are like all purple now because I've been drinking wine this whole time.
It's a look.
It's a look.
Mexie's got her wine mom.
Got my wine. Thanks, everybody. Got a great time. But yeah, no, I had such a great time. Thank you, Nick, for inviting us on.
Yeah.
Like, so fucking awesome.
I had a great time too.
Yeah, and I'll definitely promote the replay so people can, because I think this was a super important conversation. So yeah.
I loved it. I can't wait till we do our next one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to say, if you did have any questions that you weren't comfortable asking in the stream, or that, now that we're ending, you don't have time to ask, you can send them to any of us. If you want to send them to me, it's pinkspots@gmail.com, or just via social media for any of us. But I would love for these to start becoming more interactive, in the sense that we start like actively answering questions from the community and basing what the streams are about from that. So I did capture that tantric is a topic that you're interested in, and that race and sexuality is a topic. So yeah, please feel free to send those along, and let's make this like a community project where we get to have these conversations together. All right, and we don't have the next one scheduled, so just keep your ears and eyes open. Follow us on social media, whatever you got to do. Subscribe to this damn channel if you haven't already.
Yeah, subscribe to Kink.
I'm so close to 1,000, but I'm still like so far away. Yeah, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye, everyone.
Bye.